Manson as our ambassador to the United States. But, Mr. Speaker, before I go into the details, I want to be very clear with this House that while this statement will focus on the process surrounding Peter Manson's vetting and appointment, at the heart of this, there is also a judgment I made that was wrong.
The name had been submitted to the King as Minister's recommendation. The Prime Minister had made an announcement that Manson was his nominee without caveats. The British government had sought agrément, the formal diplomatic process for a host government accepting a nominee from the US government, and that had been obtained before I arrived in post. The position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Manson.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
This was not due process. Everyone knows the price of misleading the House. Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility and go?
Yeah! Mr. Speaker, let's be absolutely clear. Before Manson took up his post, UKSV recommended with red flags that clearance should be denied, and there was high concern that that was not brought to my attention or the attention of the Foreign Secretary at the time or subsequently is a very serious error of judgment. She rushed to judgment as she always did, just like the Iran war. Mr. Speaker, I was elected by the British people because they let the country down for 14 long years. Whatever she says, whatever noise they make, nothing is going to distract me from delivering for our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Yes, it's the final countdown to Jezza back on Monday. Ian Collins for the final day. It's into the weekend with a rammed news agenda here this morning. Ways to get in touch: 0344 499 1000. You can drop us a voice note there as well. Here's a headline that might not please many of you. Reform cannot win the next election outright without the help of the Conservatives. Is it time to unite the right? Reform would need an alliance with the Tories to govern as British politics fragment. This is a major poll that's just gone. What do they call it? Not a major poll, it's called a mega poll. That's it. It's like a major poll, but more mega, yeah. According to this, if there was an election, Reform would get 188 seats. That's far short of a majority. And that's not far behind the Tories, who would get 159 seats. Unless they join forces, and you could throw in other right-wing parties there as well. A left-wing alliance, unless they can do this, is coming your way. That means we would have a government of the Greens, the Labours, the Lib Dems, Plaid Cymru and SNP. You might as well start gnawing your own face off right now at the mere thought that this could be coming your way. So how do you feel about it? Because this does really divide the room. The idea that you have legged it from the Tories after many years of support that you felt have ultimately come to nothing at all, only to discover that Mr Farage may have to go, almost cap in hand, to Kemi Badenoch and say, come with us, because otherwise it's a big old rainbow coalition of left-wing parties. How do you feel about the Reform uniting with the Conservatives? How do you feel about throwing other parties in there as well? Advance UK, Restore Britain. That's assuming, of course, either of those parties would throw up MPs in an election. Broadly speaking, it would be Tories and the Reform. If you're a Reform voter because you were a disgruntled Tory voter, What's your assessment on where that story would go? For you, would that feel like the whole purpose of almost rebranding your own politics is completely gone in the bin if Nigel Farage is going to get into bed with the Conservatives? 0344 499 1000. Also this morning, and bad news for Labour, more than half of voters want Keir Starmer to resign in the event of a Labour wipeout at the local elections on May the 7th. That would include Labour voters as well. But again, you're in that territory. Be careful what you wish for, because Starmer goes. That doesn't mean the Labour government go. It just means a new leader for Labour and therefore a new Prime Minister. Smart money says it will either be Angela Rayner, possibly... I mean, you laugh when you say these names. Angela Rayner could be the Prime Minister. Ed Miliband could be the Prime Minister. Might be Andy Burnham if they can find a sly way to parachute him in to Westminster. Also this morning, the migrant rapist who was on the run for murder, convicted yesterday, the 20-year-old Egyptian, not only arrived in the UK illegally on a Channel dinghy, but he was wanted for murder back in his own country. This is almost it's a rhetorical question, really. Are the concerns over small boats now more justified than ever before? I've made this argument. You have to be careful. If you want to win this argument, you have to be careful how you have this argument. So here we go. You got a boat of 90 people, 100 men on a boat, OK? I'm totally relaxed about believing that 98 of those blokes are completely fine. They wouldn't wish harm on anybody. They want to start a new life, either legitimately or illegitimately, whatever. They want to start a new life. They've legged it from a horrible country where not much goes on and it's pretty tyrannical, but it's not. They're not escaping war necessarily. They want a new life. 98 of them, perfectly fine. 2 of them aren't. Here's the question. Which 2 of the 100? Go on, point to the 2 that are the wrong ones. You don't know. Nobody knows. It's the same reason why we lock our doors at night. We don't believe most people in our street, our postcode, or even our town are going to rob you blind while you sleep. Nobody believes that. But a few people will. We just don't know which ones. Therefore, we lock our doors. It's that simple. Your response on that as well, 0344 499 1000. Self-checkouts in supermarkets and shops are partly to blame for a rise in middle-class shoplifting. I don't know, they always say middle class. I don't know how they know it's middle class shopping. It could be anyone that's nicking stuff. This is according to the chairman of Marks and Spencer's, Archie Norman, claimed that shoppers were choosing to steal items instead of scanning them, particularly when they're pressed for time. Come on, have you swiped a crafty kumquat at the till? Have you gone mad with a pepper or a bag of spuds and thought, you know what, it's in the basket, I don't think anyone's... Haven't got time because it wouldn't scare. I'll just take it out with me. You can fess up if you want to. It's the crime of theft, by the way, we're talking about here. It's no laughing matter. Christina says, Reform UK will win. I have faith. The only day that matters is the general election. The only problem with that is that there is little evidence based on all the polling that would happen. They will win, but are they going to win a majority? If they don't win a majority, then they have to get into bed with someone. And that is likely to be the Conservatives. Richard in Leicester says, morning Ian, absolute rubbish. Reform can win. Media priming the public again. Where do you get your rubbish from? The idea that there's been some kind of meeting and everyone's got together, let's get a poll. No, this is an independent poll that has looked at a variety of outcomes. And they've dug deep. What makes this rather interesting, they've dug deep into each constituency on this one. So they haven't just sat round a pub table with a pad. I mean, these things do have, and they're not always correct, by the way, but they do have a science behind putting them together. And when you're in the kind of annals of a particular party, in this case, Reform, I appreciate what Richard's saying. You look at all the mood music, you look at what's happening, you look at the kind of policy announcements. This morning on the front page of the Daily Mail, Farage, I'll wage war on benefits culture. Reform leader says he'll face down riots, protests and strikes to cut the welfare bill. Now, that is very popular, but it's very easy to forget it's not popular with everyone. I know that sounds mad to us and to you. I agree ultimately with Richard, I would imagine. I think we're probably on the same page. But you have to remember, there's lots of your fellow humanoids out there that don't think this stuff. They're not even perturbed by this stuff. They simply just move on and don't really dwell on the details. So it's going to be a battleground, and Reform Star, according to polling, appears to have peaked maybe 6 months ago, and now it's all out to see what they can do in the next couple of years. But this particular poll, could be wrong, of course. This mega poll says Reform will need to get into bed with the Tories. Tony is in West Sussex on this point. Early doors, Tony. Morning to you, mate. 6:10. What have you got for us?
Well, I think that they got it wrong when Boris Johnson got his 80-seat majority. And there's a lot of people down here in West Sussex I play golf with, I walk my dogs and I meet them and etc. And I ask the question, local elections coming up, who are you going to vote for? And every single person says Reform. And one bloke said to me, he says, but don't tell my wife, she'll kill me. She'll think I'm an extreme right-winger. So I think people are closet Reform voters, but they're not telling people.
Yeah, there is always that, the kind of shy voter that doesn't sort of fess up. I have to say, I kind of share that, Tony, whenever I speak to... look, I live in an area where there's a lot of middle-class fluff going on. People who gravitate to the Lib Dems, but they couldn't actually tell you why. If you sat there with them for an hour and said, just give us the policy where you think the Liberal... They wouldn't really know. For some reason, there's just a sort of a weird... some kind of attraction to the Lib Dem. I don't think it's in the name. I don't know what it is. But... when I speak to ordinary, when I speak to my postman, I speak to the plumber, I speak to the guy that was doing the road works outside the other day, I get the same answer that you just gave. Yeah,
this is what I think is going to happen. I think May the 7th. Well, down here, you speak to any Conservative, they knocked on my door the other day, you're going to vote Conservative. I said, no, never, ever again. Yeah. They said, and I know David quite well, and he said, Tony, we're going to get obliterated.
Interesting.
We are going to get obliterated. He said every door, basically 9 out of 10 doors say, sorry, I'm a Reform voter.
What do you think, what would you feel, Tony, if this, let's say this mega poll was accurate and Nigel Farage comes back with 188 seats, which, by the way, let's not pretend that isn't incredibly impressive for a party that didn't exist half an hour ago. 188 seats, but not far behind the Tories with 159. If that were true, how would you feel if they had to align somehow?
Well, I wouldn't like it, and I don't think Farage would do it, but if that was the case, with the Conservatives, they could rule, then I think Farage would swallow his pride and do it.
Because the choice would be this rainbow alliance of left-wing parties.
Yeah, I think so.
And I'm not even making this up, Tony, I nearly cried as I said that to you.
Yeah, I know. I know, mate. And
it's a grim thought, isn't it?
My tea, listening to you and thinking, you cheer me up at least, mate. You've got a great show going there.
That's great. Tony, lovely to hear from you. Glad to see you up and about early doors. 6:15. That's Tony in West Sussex. Gaynor is in Leicestershire. What are you making of it all, Gaynor? Morning.
Oh, polls. I'm 58 now, on the way to get up Britain. I have never, nor anyone I know, has been asked my opinion or our opinion about which way we're going to vote. So it just makes me wonder, is it a bit of a setup or is it a regional thing?
Well, I mean, independent pollsters, it's their livelihood. If they were caught cooking the books, they'd be not only out of business, but there's probably some illegality, I would imagine, in making up a poll. Obviously, it is interesting, because if the Guardian do a poll, it will be different from the results of the Telegraph doing a poll. So clearly there is something in who you ask. This one was I think it was around about 5,000 people, this one. I might have got that wrong. It's around that.
Oh, no,
but you're right, I've never been asked about I was once in a shopping centre and somebody with a clipboard came up to me. They said, we're from Ipsos and we're doing some polling. And I thought, I've met a pollster. And they said, just before we start, we can't have you in this poll if you work in any of these professions. And I'm not kidding you. She went, number one, radio and television. Like, bang, I'm out. So I don't know I never did find out what the poll was. But so there are, I don't know how they work. But there does seem to be a sense, and I don't think it would be too much to get our heads around, that maybe Reform might need some help from another right-wing party.
Yeah, probably, but we'll see. But I think if it's a poll of 5,000 people, 10,000 people, that should be told to the people listening to the results. Because that makes it...
Yeah, I mean, they do. They usually put in somewhere in the detail how many people that they spoke to, and this one was apparently constituency by constituency. I don't think the pollsters in this game, in this case, called electoral calculus, I don't think they've got any skin in the game to try and cook it one way or the other. It still comes out with a right-wing result.
And that's what we need to hear, because we think it's a poll, a national poll, a village poll, we don't know. So if we was given that a poll of 10,000 opinions, you know, we wouldn't feel as biased or start to panic about, oh my God, we might have to join with the Conservatives.
That's true.
But then, it's better than it would have been, but, you know, but I think it's a bit scaremongering not telling us how many the poll was took for. No disrespect to you guys.
No, we're merely just reporting what they are saying. What's interesting about this, just to compound your thoughts, Gaynor, and Tony as well, our previous caller, according to this, the Green Party would get... Now, I really struggle with this, and I'm trying to be objective. The Green Party would get 71 seats. Now, look, I don't know if you've ever seen Zach Polanski in action. This is apparently a man with a lot of charisma. That was my reaction.
Choice of word.
Yeah, absolutely. Gaynor, enjoy your day. Stay safe on the motorway as well. Alarm Clock Britain, Tony's up, Gaynor's up. We're all up doing our thing. Let's get a voice note on this point from Liam. Morning, Liam.
Morning, Ian. Liam in Yorkshire. I voted for reform at national level the other year. I'll be voting for them at local elections in the next couple of weeks, and I'll be voting for them at national level whenever the next general election is. Now, I've always thought they're probably going to have to merge with Tories, or there's going to have to be some kind of coalition further down the line, just because they've not grown enough as a party yet. But can we really risk having another 5 years added on to this? 5 of a left-wing, socialist, liberal, woke, weak government. Look how much we've deteriorated in such a short space of time. I think Kemi Badenoch's, like a few people have said, right leader at the wrong time. They'd have to sort something out, put egos aside, because it's going to come down to putting country above party. And I think that's the only way that it's going to be won. Anyway, have a good show, mate.
than there are people on the planet.
On the planet.
Sad I've missed coming on your show.
It's your WhatsApps, it's your WhatsApps, it's your WhatsApps, it's your...
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. 6:20. It is the home of Common Sense. Ian Collins for the final day in for Jeremy Kyle. We're talking about this curious megapole. Let's get another voice note. Morning, Carl.
Hi, Ian. Carl from Coventry here. The only people that's going to not want the welfare bill reducing are the people on welfare. Of course it is. And there isn't enough people on welfare, even though there is too many on welfare, but there isn't enough people on welfare to outvote the reform voters. And, well, polls, just another poll. I don't care if it's a mega poll. It's just another poll.
It's just another poll. How much belief do we put in polling? We are joined by Linda Jubilee. Linda is, of course, journalist, broadcaster, Fox News, Sky News, ITV, you name it. Linda's been all over the show. I say that kindly, of course. Yes. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. I thought you were going to say, you name it, she's been there, but then I think that sounds a little bit questionable,
doesn't it? That sounds even worse, doesn't it? So we've got this mega poll. There's a couple of points on this. We'll come to specifics of a reform policy. This mega poll that has been done that suggests that Nigel Farage reform at the election would get 188 seats. Which again, you have to say, they've got half a dozen MPs so far. They didn't exist half an hour ago in relative terms. Mm-hmm. And here we are talking about a party that's going to come back with 188 seats, but of course it's far short of a majority. The Tories in this poll would get 159 seats, which is quite impressive, bearing in mind that what they've been through. Again, some of this we can find hard to believe. That Labour would go down from having 400 seats to 86, so they'd get a right old pasting. So the only way Nigel Farage, based on this, could form a government would be getting in bed with the Conservatives. Of course, the whole point of reform was that they are not the Conservatives. We're getting away from the Conservatives because the Conservatives weren't really conservative. This has upset a lot of reform voters, naturally. If they didn't do that, we'd be left with a left-wing alliance of parties, which include, and it's a list of doom, this, Linda. This would be the Green Party, Labour, Lib Dems, SNP and Plaid Cymru. There'd be 5 of them. I mean, you can only imagine the chaos.
Yes.
One of those, Labour would be slightly... So Keir Starmer or whoever could be the Prime Minister, but they'd be cutting deals left, right and centre for pet projects almost for all of those parties. So there's that. But the big aspect that has really fired up opinion here this morning is... how do you feel if you're a reform voter and you have to get in bed with the Tories? The very party that almost created reform. Reform created out of, or certainly mobilised and have grown out of the chaos of the Tories.
I think that will happen, though. I think what will happen is there will be some kind of deal between Reform and Conservative. And that's not even horse trading afterwards. I think this may happen before the election.
Right, so you're not talking about... one of those, like we saw in 2010, where there was those days of, Gordon Brown and Cameron and goodness knows Nick Clegg mooching. Most of the country never heard of Nick Clegg. Suddenly he was pivotal in these debates. So you think beforehand it'll be similar to what they've done before and not stand certain candidates in certain seats?
That's right. Like a coupon election where you actually do some kind of agreement where Conservatives agree to stand back in a seat where Reform is likely to win and Reform do exactly the same thing. I think that could happen. Certainly there was a great deal of fear over recent months in the Conservative Party about just how bad the picture can be. So it's totally within the interest of the Conservative Party to do this. And Nigel Farage has always kind of poo-pooed the idea. But at the end of the day, the Conservatives do have a campaign machine. They do have experience of government and they do have process which you do need in the campaign and governing afterwards. And Reform are very much untested to that degree. Nigel Farage may say he doesn't want that at the moment, but it's surprising what people do when it comes to taking expedient action.
And to be fair, Kemi Badenoch would say the same thing. She would say, no, we're never going to do that. We're going to win the next election. Now, her star is kind of rising. A lot of the polls suggesting that Nigel Farage's position is sort of stabilising. It's not growing
Yeah.
any. You know, it's got to a point. There was a lot of mood music around all sorts of things that have gone on. The Labour government have been woeful. Reform have been the chief beneficiaries of that news, as distinct from the Conservative being the chief beneficiaries of that. So, a couple of our calls this morning saying everyone they bump into says, you know, no, I'm going to vote Reform. I'm not going to go with the Tories. Kemi Badenoch would say, well, we're a different party now, even though she was very much part of the last Conservative government.
Yeah.
But there is a sense that she is kind of getting her claws into something at the moment.
I think she's moving the needle a bit.
Yeah.
I don't think she grasped the nettle, to use another phrase, at PMQs this week. I think that was an open goal for her this Wednesday. And
it was her worst one for a long time, given that it should have been her best one.
Yeah, given what the position of the Prime Minister,
Yeah.
she should really have been a goal scorer at that match. But she wasn't. And I think that is a little bit of a setback.
Yeah.
But she has improved hugely in debate, and she's improved on the campaign trail, is my feeling. But she still has some way to go, improving to the public. The Conservatives are a different party and have now got different values. The person I think reassures the public whenever he gets on air is Mel Stride. I've got a real soft spot for Mel Stride. I think he's a very, very capable politician, and I think he's got real principles and values and vision, and I think people can get behind him.
Yep.
They see him as kind of maybe the power behind the throne. I'm not sure. That's just my view.
Well, they have got, as you say, you know, whether you love them or hate them, they have got an entire machine already there.
Yeah,
They've also got candidates, even though their voter base, in terms of turning it into MPs at the last election, went down dramatically.
Yeah.
There's a lot of those names still waiting in the wings, whereas other parties, including Reform, have got to literally go around the country looking for 600 people.
And I think Reform have lost...
They've never had to do that before.
Yeah, so it's untested, and there's a little bit of a loss of momentum at the moment. I mean, Nigel Farage, slightly affected, I feel, and this is just my observation, by his relationship with Trump. And President Trump's reputation in this country has slightly diminished because people don't want to be involved with this war. They don't want the consequences, the financial and economic consequences. And also his remarks he made about our troops in Afghanistan. You know, a lot of people can forget those, but those people who lost loved ones, who had people who are catastrophically injured, they won't ever forget that. So that's a factor for Nigel Farage. I suspect he's keeping his head down until all of this blows over.
I mean, I think there is still a lot of support for Donald Trump, but I do sense, and we've taken calls on this from people that think he slightly lost his way with some of the comments and some of the sort of
thing about the Pope. That was a big mistake. I mean,
wasn't it?
Just don't go there. I mean, just do not take on the Catholic Church. Actually.
Don't take on the Catholic Church, and don't put a picture of yourself as
Jesus would be my #1 recommendation there. But he took it down quite quickly. The thing about Catholic churches, I think, I mean, I am a Catholic, but they've got 1.5 billion followers. You know, there's the Pope in a city-state in the Vatican, surrounded by the Swiss Guard. I mean, he's a pretty powerful guy on many, many levels. I simply wouldn't have gone there. And I think that was a real tipping point for a lot of people. I mean, I know people that up until that point would say, well, Trump does get stuff done, and he has a different way of working. He doesn't work like a politician, he works like a businessman, but let's all bear with him. But that all came to grief with the come to Jesus moment.
Yeah, he wasn't taking on a local vicar from a sleepy English village somewhere, was he? I mean, this was actually the might of the papacy, as it were. Let's play a little clip here, just back to this coalition idea, Linda. This was Jeremy Kyle last year talking to Kemi Badenoch about whether she would consider a coalition. Have a listen to this.
If you envisage a position in 3 years' time where you're polling at a certain number and so Reform, would you, for the good of the country, get together with Farage and Reform to make sure we never have to deal with this shambles of a government ever again?
We owe it to the British people to make sure that we end this mess. But
I get that.
To spend more on benefits.
No, I get that. But would you not, in 3 years, to keep this lot out again, would you not say, I have to do right by the British people?
So that is what I can say. I will guarantee that I will do right by the British people. The best option is the agenda that the Conservatives have. Reform has a slightly different agenda. They say things, but they don't really understand. They don't do the work. They want more benefits. They're telling everybody everything. I'm not telling everybody whatever they want to hear. I'm being honest. And what I have said is that, you know, local councils, you know, you look for people who are going to deliver a Conservative agenda. That is what I promise people.
So she's saying that, but of course what you say in interviews like that, again, Nigel would be in the same position as distinct from what is likely to happen are two different things.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, again, too much vertical pronoun in that little bit of delivery there. Too much I did this, I did that, I want this, I want that. Politicians have got to stop doing that because it's not passing muster with the public. They don't like that kind of talk, and they have made that perfectly clear. I do think that she has become better in debate and better in interviews, but you know, I think at the end of the day, the Conservatives will have to do some kind of deal with the reform. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. But Reform would be the bigger party, so Nigel Farage would still be the Prime Minister.
Because that's the deal.
Because that's the deal.
They would only do the deal.
That would put
deal
her,
would only exist.
That would put her as either...
She knows that.
Chancellor... That would be the second big position.
Reform would insist upon that. They would insist that if we do a deal, Nigel becomes Prime Minister, because for him...
Yeah, that's non-negotiable.
The next election's existential. You know, this is what he's aiming at. He's aiming at being Prime Minister, and this is probably 99% surely his last chance.
And also, I mean, it's not a... You could look at this another way, I suppose. It's not as if Nigel Farage is a million miles... I mean, Nigel was a Tory all his life. Richard Tice was a Tory all his life. But they got fed up with what they felt was a Conservative Party not being very conservative, which is not an unreasonable position.
Yeah, because it wasn't. And
exactly.
You know, at the end of the day, the Conservative Party was probably two parties in one.
Yeah.
It was left-leaning Tories and then the right wing of the party.
Yeah.
And now everyone is tying themselves in knots trying to work out this situation. I think the voters completely confused at the moment as to who they might vote for. It's very difficult to tell.
This comes from Dave, who says, this Rainbow Coalition, what would they want in return for their support? The SNP will want a referendum. What would the Greens want, or the Lib Dems? I'm not sure it could even work, and that would be the problem. So, Dave is bang on. The first thing the SNP would say is, we want a referendum.
Absolutely.
Okay? You've got to promise a referendum, otherwise we're not coming anywhere near you. Now, the SNP could do quite well. I know that's curious because they were dead and buried half an hour ago, and then suddenly they've made a kind of bizarre return to life.
Yeah.
After all the Sturgeon stuff and everything that went on there. So that would be their pet project. The Green Party would have, goodness, I don't know, all manner of demands in exchange for their support. But, you know, it's possible the Greens, out of those five parties, other than Labour, the Greens would get, according to this poll, will get 71 seats.
I think that's probably, right now, as a snapshot, if people were to vote now, I think that's probably quite accurate.
But what, OK, why is that? I mean, I'll say this every day till I'm blue. What has happened that's made some people go, I'm going to vote for Zach Polanski and the Green Party? What's gone on? What have they seen? What have they said?
Because I think you have to look at the demographic here. And it's young people that are voting or want to vote for Zach Polanski. I've got 2 Gen Zs and 1 millennial, actually, in my kids, and all of them are likely to vote for... 2 of them are likely to vote for Zach Polanski and 1's likely to vote Labour. I mean, how this happened to a
Have you disowned your own children?
Women?
So there's a Conservative mum and the kids are going all left-wing on you.
But that's what I'm saying.
That's like going through the kind of the teen years all over again.
Yeah, well, I've told them to make up their own minds. I've brought them up to be independent. I can hardly complain now if they do exactly what I told them to do. But if you look at the Gorton and Denton by-election, for example, as a little bit of a test case, now that went the Greens' way because of the demographics, because that's the way the constituency was broken up. the kind of working class white area, the white majority area, was, if I can speak plainly, kind of headed towards Matt Goodwin. But where the Greens were concerned, it was undergraduates and students in houses and younger couples and a migrant community that voted for Hannah Spencer, I think it is.
That's the one.
So that's why the Greens got in. Now, that can be replicated across the country. I'm not saying in every constituency, I'm not saying in every part of the country, but I think whatever you make of Zach Goldsmith, sorry, wrong politician,
you're the third person in as
it's
many
very
weeks
easy
as
to
done
do.
that. Yeah. Very different people.
Very different people. Well, both Greens, but very, very different people.
Yeah.
So I think that Zach Polanski, whatever you think of him, is going to be a consequential politician.
You see, my thinking on this is that you might come to the table, you might look at a very fragmented political scene out there. Keir Starmer and his many U-turns, the Tories still correctly bruised for letting voters down, reform a bit untested. You might look at all of these things. So even, and I don't know about your own kids what their reasoning is for this, but I would have thought if you were looking for something more left-wing, and you were very big on sort of environmental matters, you might go, right, OK, I think I'll go for the Green Party.
Yeah.
Let me just check who's the leader. Oh, let's have a look. Oh, OK, no, maybe not. Wouldn't that be...
No.
As soon as you came across Zach Polanski,
that's
you'd
not
go,
happening.
This guy is awful.
No, they do not think that.
What? Why?
They just don't.
I mean, the guy has, you know, he's not... And I'm just going to be brutal about this. He doesn't look great. He certainly doesn't have any charisma. So what is he bringing to the party?
They don't care about how he looks, and they believe.
I'm not suggesting it's a beauty contest across any of the leaders, by the way.
Yeah, but they don't really believe that he has no charisma. To them, he does have some charisma.
I can't work that out.
But that's where we are. Maybe it's an age thing, but they are. You know, a lot of the people I speak to, because I've got kids of this age, so I meet a lot of people of that age.
Yeah.
And they're clever people. They're all graduates. They've all got master's degrees.
So what are they? I mean, we should be.
I think the question you have to
ask... We're
–
closing universities if some of these people have got degrees.
Yeah, I think if you...
With respect to your own kids.
Yeah, they're qualified now, so what a relief that is.
Yeah.
But especially my girl, who's an architect, so that was a very long haul. But they're highly intelligent, highly motivated people who do take an interest in politics. And where the established political parties are concerned, that they don't have any traction with these people. So I'm simply saying there's no point in wasting a lot of breath and getting exhausted about why we should or shouldn't care about these people when we know that the voting population is likely to actually put that X next to Zach Polanski's name. And let me say one more thing.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party, I think I was at a function recently where the average age of the voter in the last election was something like 62. Now, that makes them older again in the next election.
Yeah.
Now, you've got to pay attention to those things.
It's a very good point.
Because they're not recruiting. The Conservatives are not recruiting enough young people.
Well, they have a kind of image. I mean, the fact that Margaret Thatcher hasn't been around for 50 years or whatever it is, it doesn't seem to... The word conservative sounds quite dull in a world of buzzy, colourful jargon and slogans. The Conservatives sounds like something your nan would vote for, and that's borne out in the figures that you just gave. Average age 60 in the 60s. Greens perhaps seems more. I hate that word, progressive. But forward-thinking.
Yeah.
There's something brighter. There's more awareness of the world we live. I would still come back to this, though, Linda. Confirmation bias. You know, you mentioned about highly intelligent... Confirmation bias, you know, where, it happens in the world of sport brilliantly. You know, the Chelsea fan never did see a Chelsea striker kick that United fan in the shins. No matter how many times you show them the video, they never said, never happened, Red, look. Confirmation bias has no link to intelligence whatsoever. So you can be the brightest person on the planet. You could have Stephen Fry and that fellow that was in a wheelchair, him, what was his name?
Oh, Stephen...
Hawking.
Yeah.
Stephen, the Stephens, shall we say. You could have both Stephens. They would suffer from confirmation bias. And I think there's a similar thing here. So it's a curious kind of part of the pie chart that nobody can sort of name or say what it is. There's just something. Because I don't think it's based... I don't think most people are going, I'm going to vote Green, have gone through their policies and said, this is the one I want to do. In fact, if you look at their policies, you probably find most people were against it.
Yeah, but you maybe you are a little biased here, because if you actually, forgive me for saying so, because maybe I am too, but my eldest boy, for example, is a behavioural economist. Now, I can tell you he has looked at all the humpback yield curves we need to look at.
So what has he looked at in the Greens manifesto? Well, they haven't got a manifesto yet. And gone, right, this is... They're going to tax the pants off me. They're going to do this, that and the other. I can't remember what... They're going to make renting out your house illegal, but taking drugs legal. I mean, there you go, just that equation. Wouldn't anybody look at that and say, these people are bonkers?
No, but they aren't saying that. What we have to look at is what they're actually telling us. And then we have to think about how we campaign effectively towards the next election. Scrape everything else away and get back on track with how to win an election. And that, at the moment, I'm afraid, we are not doing. I think the Conservative Party have made considerable gains, as you pointed out earlier in this conversation. But look at Labour. Well, look at Labour. I mean, my goodness me.
What the... Yeah.
Sir Keir Starmer, not long for this political world, I suspect.
Hello.
Yeah, he may have to go. I don't think he'll go. I mean, I was in this studio probably fairly recently, and people were saying, you know, he might not last until today. And I do agree that the last 4 or 5 days are the moment of greatest political danger for him. But he's passed through, and I think he'll be in place for several reasons, but mostly because no one wants to take on the leadership just before the elections, where the Labour Party are likely to do very, very badly. So I think there will be some sort of thought that he should carry the can for that and everything else, wrap it all up, push it to one side, limp into the summer recess, have a big old planning situation going on across the summer, and in the autumn, a new leader.
I think all of this comes down to the new way that we vote and the new way we engage and draw our opinions is based on a feeling. It's based on a feeling rather than a philosophical deep dive into... It's the usual thing, isn't it? If you went out onto the streets and gave people a list of, right, what would you do in this situation with health, education? I think you'd find most people in this country are either conservatives with a small c and would likely vote reform.
Yeah, people do vote on their feelings. Yeah. So with Sir Keir Starmer, for example, there is a feeling that he chucks people under the bus. That's the line that's cut through.
Yes.
He's chucked another one under the bus. It must be getting crowded under that bus. The number of people who said exactly that to me. And that's a feeling. That's not about policies. It's not about vision. It's not about strategy. It's just we've got the feeling that he lets people down, that he doesn't stand by his troops. More importantly, that is precisely what he said he would do in a meeting in 2022. So he's thought of as being dishonest as well.
I'll tell you how bad it is. Only Keir Starmer can throw somebody under a bus when there's a bus strike, right? I mean, it's just a... This is how bad it is. He's picked the wrong week, hasn't he, really? Nothing's running. There's no buses. He's still giving it a go. Linda, stay with us. Lots more to come. And great comments from you. Message 87222. Voice note 0344 499 1000. Let's get one from Craig. Morning, Craig.
Good morning, Ian. This is Craig from Ilkley in Yorkshire. So these polls that allegedly have taken place, I don't know how they do it, because how can they phone up, geographical phone numbers anymore? Because most people don't have landlines. Most people just rely on their mobiles, and their numbers are non-geographic to start with. So if they're calling people randomly, via the first, 4 or 5 digits of a landline number, who are they going to get answering the phone? Nobody, because nobody's got landlines. I just don't know how it works. Are they knocking on doors? Are they writing to people randomly? How does it work? Please explain. Thank you.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is 7:15. So much comment on this mega poll. Let's get another voice. Here's Jennifer. Morning, Jennifer.
Unfortunately, I'm on the benefit list. I've worked majority of my life, but the last few years my health has failed me considerably. But there is not a chance in hell I would ever vote anyone else other than Reform. And that reason is for my children's sake and my grandchildren's sake and this country. I love my country.
Fair enough. Jennifer, thank you for that. I have to say, Nigel Farage isn't talking about taking benefits away from somebody like Jennifer. He's talking about this, completely unsustainable. When they talk about the welfare budget being a bit bloated, it's not bloated, it's unsustainable. It literally cannot go on.
Yeah, we know that.
We can't, nobody can seem to quite work out what the criteria is to get you on the list. We know that there are curious things happening. Young people who've never worked, millions who are adding to various parts of the benefit system with no requirement to work as well. That's always the interesting one. The other side of the story is, well, if you try getting benefits in this country, it's really darn hard. Others saying, well, it's clearly not, because we wouldn't have these numbers. So Nigel Farage, front page of the Daily Mail, there it is. I'll wage war on benefit culture. It's an interview he did with the Mail. He said he was ready to face down protests, strikes or even riots to cut the bill. And we now know from recent research that the benefit bill itself is bigger than the entirety of the amount of tax we take in.
Yeah.
One department.
I know, it's absolutely astonishing. And at the end of the day, it's a matter of mathematics. I think Margaret Thatcher said socialism works until they run out of other people's money.
Right. Yeah.
And the problem here is you simply cannot spend what you haven't got. And you've got tremendous pressure on the Exchequer because you've got what you identified as the NEETs, people who are not in education, employment or training. At the other end, you've got a growing older population, and many of whom are dependent on the state. So you've got a much slimmer and smaller number of people actually earning money that generates tax income for the Exchequer. And at the same time, you've got a growing benefits culture. Now, You've said it's more expenditure than all of the other departments put together. I'm not sure of the exact numbers, but what I do know is that actually we are being pressured now to increase our defence spending, quite rightly, because we're living in a very dangerous world, and we are simply going to have to put the defence of the realm, first, or at least move it up our list of priorities, and that is going to be almost impossible to do.
It is going to be impossible to do. That's what Nigel Farage is focusing on. That does have mass support. But people don't believe the Tories are the ones to sort that out, that it needs a strong voice like Nigel Farage, like Reform, who won't just say it. It's in their heart. You believe that it's in their heart to sort this out. Loads of comment coming through. One here says we might end up with a three-way coalition: Reform, Tory and Restore. Although, I have to say, I don't say this with any... I'm being completely objective here, there isn't any poll that suggests Restore would come back, really, other than maybe Rupert Lowe would retain his seat.
He is a good politician. He's a strong politician.
Very.
But at the end of the day, no matter how much you like him, it wasn't... You can't build a party just on one person. Nigel Farage knows that. Even though he has a strong personality, he knows a big priority for him is to build structure around him as a character. I can see that there are many reasons why Restore might be appealing, but it is incredibly difficult to get a new political party off the ground. I mean, this is not an overnight success for Nigel Farage.
True.
He's been around the block
is a view,
times.
though, Linda, that Nigel Farage is actually quite relaxed about doing a deal with the Conservatives. It's a view that is out there.
He must have considered it.
And that is because he is a Conservative, as in traditional Conservative.
Yeah.
Just not the kind of Conservative Party we've had for the last sort of 15 years. it would be his greatest dream to lead a party that is, in its very core, conservative. Even to, I mean, who knows? Maybe possibly even changing the name back from Reform if they merge together, so it becomes a sort of true Conservative party. But there are so many people out there that just don't trust the Tories. Dan says the Tories are history. It's either restore or reform. Paul in London, as a Reform member, I wouldn't be bothered if the Conservatives had to join up. Kemi isn't of the old Conservatives. Anything to avoid a Labour and Green coalition. The Greens aren't for this country. It's a party being used with the help of useful idiots along the way. Leaving the ECHR is imperative.
A lot of people say that, actually.
And I think the Conservatives have now certainly flagged that up. I know that leaving it, saying you're going to leave it and actually leaving it is a bit more complicated. I know there's much more to it than just going, oh, we're leaving the ECHR. But that should never be a reason not to explore it, not to think about it, not to make it happen.
I think it will come to that we do leave, actually. And, you know, I don't say that lightly, because a couple of years ago I'd have died in a ditch over that. But gradually I see us being worn down by some of the things we have to do.
Yeah.
And I don't think people think it's fair.
Yeah. This from James. It's funny how all the Reform supporters accepted the validity of all the polls that gave them a majority. But now it's a conspiracy theory because the mega poll doesn't. Farage will have to accept at some stage he just can't find that amount of quality candidates in such a small amount of time. I mean, I do know that Reform are working almost 24/7 on getting the right candidates, because it's very easy to stand on a landmine, isn't it, when you just sort of end up getting some. I think previously they got a little bit stung in some areas where they thought, oh, we'll go for this guy because we just don't have any other time. There's nothing in the time frame that's going to allow us to do the full process, as it were.
Yeah, it's very easy to pick the wrong candidate. Just ask Sir Keir Starmer. He's bad at picking candidates for jobs.
Yeah.
And I think that does happen, that you have to have a really, really thorough vetting process for candidates. I can't really speak about the Labour Party or Reform or even the Lib Dems, but the Conservative Party certainly has quite a thorough vetting process for its candidates. It's diligent, and it was set up a long time ago, and the Conservatives tend to operate it quite ruthlessly.
Yeah.
And I think you have to do that. If people want to stand for public office, you can't have any skeletons lurking in the cupboard that are likely to not just embarrass the leadership, but are likely to be a problem for the voter.
Good point. The special relationship is a big focus at the moment because the King is... When do they go?
Next week.
Next week, isn't it? Monday they go. Donald Trump, there's very few... You don't... I mean, quite genuine, you don't hear Donald Trump get animated about anyone other than the King.
He loves the royal family.
He loves the royal family. He's so excited about this. And he was asked about whether, you know, this is going to change the special... Is he going to get it back on track? So could Donald Trump actually be... an assistant to Keir Starmer in many ways? He's been talking overnight about quite a lot of things. Let's have a listen to the President in action. And this involves Prince Harry.
Prince Harry today has said that he would like to see you do more to end the war in Ukraine. Do you think it's appropriate for a royal to make those comments ahead of the visit on Monday?
Prince Harry?
Yes, sir.
How's he doing? How's his wife? Please give him my regards, okay? No, I don't know. I know one thing. Prince Harry is not speaking for the UK, that's for sure. I think I'm speaking for the UK more than Prince Harry, but I appreciate his advice very much. Great advice.
Oh, dear.
That is one of the best. That is how his wife. That's lovely. And I think when Donald Trump said, I'm speaking for the UK more than Prince Harry, that's just
actually, he
brilliant.
might be right. Let's just think about that.
Yeah.
Because Prince Harry's not the most popular person in the world at the moment, as far as we are concerned.
True. Let's have a listen to Trump talking about tariffs on the UK.
We don't like it when they target American companies, because basically you're talking about our great American companies, and whether we like those companies or don't like them, they're American companies, and they're the top companies in the world. And we've been looking at it. UK did it, a couple of other people did it. They think they're going to make an easy buck. That's why they've all taken advantage of our country. They don't take advantage of it. No, we've been looking at it, and we can meet that very easily by just putting a big tariff on the UK, so they better be careful. If they don't drop the tax, we'll probably put a big tariff on the UK.
Oh. There it is, yeah. Big tariff. You just stick one on there. That's how it is. Yeah. Donald, you're not running North Korea, mate. There is a little bit of a democratic process you might have to go through.
That's right.
Nonetheless, the point I was trying to get to here is on Monday, because he was previously asked as well about the, could the King being there in the States, could that rekindle, or I can't remember the specific words, reinvigorate the relationship with the UK? And he said, yes, it could.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, the great value amongst a couple of other key points is that our royal family can operate something called soft power. There's no point in having soft power unless you operate it.
Yep.
And now is the time to do that. I'm sure that King Charles is aware of this, because he knows how disastrously the relationship has suffered in recent weeks. So he will be there'll be public speeches, and we'll be able to detect that in those speeches. But probably what's more important is what goes on behind closed doors in the conversations there. And I think he will make some progress.
Is Charles going to say, oh, Donald, please, just drop the tariffs, mate?
Yeah.
Sure. He might say that. Just a final one to finish on. The chairman of Marks & Spencer's, Archie Norman, claims that self-checkouts are fueling a rise in shoplifting among good, honest people. Well, you're not good and honest if you're nicking stuff, are you? He added that automated tills broke the human link between customers and retailers. I don't know whether I should ask you on air, Linda, whether you've ever slid a pepper into the bag rather than through the scanner. But that's the kind of thing they're talking about here. People who nick stuff. I think he even referenced that it could be because people are in a rush.
Oh, that has happened. Yeah, I've actually walked out of shops holding stuff because I've been concentrating on something else, and the beep has gone off and I've had to go back. That
You're still using that excuse, Linda. The magistrate didn't buy it. I'm not buying it.
Yeah, no. Everyone bought it.
Yeah.
But I think that... Oh, do you remember that time... Who's the guy that presents on another channel? Richard Madeley. He left with, I think, half a dozen pork sausages, and he was reported...
He did, didn't he?
He did. I remember it. I was a young journalist at the time, and I remember that happening. But I think that Archie Norman has a point, that there is tremendous hardship now in certain parts of the community. He does have a point. But the other thing is that I just think... it is easier now that the relationship between the customer and the retailer has broken down. I think that happens more often.
Linda, we've hit the clock. It's been brilliant. Good to see you. Linda Jubilee with us on the programme. More from you coming next.
Position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson. He was a member of the House of Lords, he was a Privy Councillor. The risks that attending his appointment were well known and had been made clear to the Prime Minister before appointment. Now, in the end, the FCDO insisted and put its foot down. I understand my predecessor had to be very firm in person. But that was a live debate at the point of announcement, and I think it's important to make that clear.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to provide the House with information that I now have about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to the United States. But, Mr. Speaker, before I go into the details, I want to be very clear with this House that while this statement will focus on the process surrounding Peter Manson's vetting and appointment, at the heart of this, there is also a judgment I made that was wrong.
The name had been submitted to the King as Minister's recommendation. The Prime Minister had made an announcement that Mandelson was his nominee without caveats. The British government had sought agrément, the formal diplomatic process for a host government accepting a nominee from the US government, and that had been obtained before I arrived in post. A position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
This was not due process. Everyone knows the price of misleading the House. Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility and go?
Mr. Speaker, let's be absolutely clear. Before Mandelson took up his post, UKSV recommended with red flags that clearance should be denied, and there was high concern that was not brought to my attention or the attention of the Foreign Secretary at the time or subsequently is a very serious error of judgment. She rushed to judgment as she always did, just like the Iran war. Mr. Speaker, I was elected by the British people because they let the country down for 14 long years. Whatever she says, whatever noise they make, nothing is going to distract me from delivering for our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. Yes, the last day of Ian Collins in for Jezza. He's back on Monday right here at the home of common sense. So much to get through. It's a headline that might not please everyone. Reform cannot win an election without the help of the Conservatives. Is it time to unite the right? Reform would need an alliance with the Tories to govern as British politics fragments, according to this mega poll. If there was an election, Reform would get 188 seats, which, by the way, is a massive headline in itself. For a party that currently has half a dozen, to suddenly find yourself with 188 is extraordinary. But according to this poll, the Tories wouldn't be far behind with 159. So if they joined forces, they could make it work. Is that likely to be the outcome? Both parties will resist the findings of that poll in that respect. I'm sure about that. And, of course, we can always say polls schmoles. The grim part of this is that if the right didn't unite, you'd end up with a kind of rainbow alliance, a coalition of utter doom, with the Greens, Labour, Lib Dems, SNP and Plaid Cymru forming a coalition. I mean, you would literally get nothing done. It would be absolutely chaotic. You would have all of those individual parties looking at their pet projects. So the SNP would undoubtedly throw in independence, another referendum on that. That would be a red line for them. God knows what will be on the Green wish list, because according to this poll, they'd get 71 seats. They'd be further ahead of the game than the Lib Dems. So make of it whatever you will. Also this morning, the migrant rapist who was on the run for murder, convicted yesterday of a violent assault of a young girl, him and 2 others. The 20-year-old Egyptian not only arrived in the UK illegally on a Channel dinghy, but was wanted for murder back in his own country. Surely now the concerns over small boats are more justified than ever. Surely. We'll talk to Alf Dubbs a little later in this hour. And self-checkout supermarket shops are partly to blame for a rise in what they call, they always politely say, middle-class shoplifting. Surely it's just shoplifting. I don't think they've been able to demographically identify, oh, look, Mrs. Smithers over there looks like she's stolen a kumquat. She's therefore very middle class, although I think you could argue kumquat theft is possibly the domain of the middle classes. This is Archie Norman, the chairman of M&S. He said that shoppers were choosing to steal items instead of scanning them when they're pressed for time. I think he's being quite polite there. No, they don't scan them when they want to nick it and not pay for it. Let's get a word on the big stories of the day in a moment with Isabel Oakeshott. First, a quick voice note on that mega poll from Hev.
Good morning, Ian. Lovely to hear your voice this morning. This is Hev from Kent. Yeah, I just heard your person saying, or somebody on there saying that the only person that will vote for Labour or whatever, or is people on benefits. Well, I'm on benefits, I'm disabled, and to be quite honest, I can totally understand what they're saying, but there's no way I'm voting for anybody else but Reform, because I don't want this country taken over. I want this country under control, and I believe Nigel is the only person with a conviction to actually do it. It's not just words, it's not just, I mean, I like Kemi, but it's only recently she's come into her own. Do you know what I mean? Nigel has always been Nigel. He's always been the same character, he's always been the same, like, stick with what he believes in, not what he thinks people want to hear.
Yeah, and a ton of people this morning absolutely in agreement with everything Hev has just said. And I should say, when Nigel Farage talks about a war on benefit culture, Nigel isn't talking about taking benefits away from people like Hev and others who need benefits. I mean, that is part and parcel of a very proud system of assisting those that need extra assistance, be that short term or in some cases in the longer term. What we're talking about is the dramatic, astonishing, unsustainable rise in the welfare bill, which has now literally exceeded the amount of money we take in cash. I mean, that just, it's not even an opinion, it's a matter of basic fact. That can't carry on. Isabel Oakeshott joins us, Talk's international editor. Isabel, morning to you. I mean, you've been around the Westminster bloc and politics for many, many years. We've seen polls come and go. Sometimes they're spectacularly correct. Other times they're a little bit iffy. It's interesting how a Telegraph poll will differ from a Guardian poll, on the same question, bearing in mind they're meant to be completely independent of each other. So polls are up for a bit of questioning. But what do you make of this one? They're calling it a mega poll. It's gone by constituency to constituency, looking at what is likely to happen. And the upshot, the big headline from this, is that Reform will be the largest party, but not enough to rule without the help of the Tories.
What a horrible thought. I mean, less horrible than the thought of a coalition of the left, which I really genuinely think is just the end of our country. I mean,
it's the end of civilization, Isabel, let's be honest.
I'm not even going to challenge that wild suggestion. I mean, look, yesterday, of all days, Carla Denyer of the Green Party shouting about racism and we all need to be more humane to people coming over in small boats. And then we had that horrific court case, the conclusion of which was to find guilty 3 asylum seekers guilty of a gang rape. So look, that's what we face under the Greens and a hard left coalition: open borders and more #be kind to murderers and people that come into our country wishing us ill. In terms of could Reform work with the Conservatives, look, in the years after in the hours and days after the 2010 election, the unthinkable happened in the form of a coalition between the Conservatives and the Lib Dems. Now, both of those parties are much closer now than they were back in 2010. I mean, back in 2010, the Tories were still pretending to be conservative. David Cameron had a few policies that would appeal to reform voters now, namely he was going to get net immigration down below 100,000. What an absolute farce that was. Try timesing that by 10 or so. Yep. So, you know, back then, the idea that Conservatives could be in a coalition with Lib Dems was very novel, if I could put it that way. And actually, that was a time of quite surprising stability politically for the UK between 2010 and 2015, notwithstanding the Brexit referendum. Forgive me that my phone is just going off. Maybe it's Nigel Farage ringing to tell me that he's not doing any deals with the Tories.
Could well be.
So it sort of seemed inconceivable that would work, and it did work. But we're in very different times now. The UK is in a perilous position in terms of our economy, our fractured society, and I think personalities-wise, here's the thing, personalities-wise, between David Cameron and Nick Clegg, the leaders of that coalition, there was real alignment. There was a kind of chemistry there that really worked. I'm afraid to say that Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch really dislike each other. I mean, there's no love lost, if I could put it diplomatically like that. You know, they barely can exchange the time of day, not because Nigel Farage is rude, though I have to say Kemi Badenoch has a reputation for being very rude.
Why do they not like each other, Isabel? I mean, I would have thought that, if anything, it was just neutral. I would imagine they don't know each other that well. There must be more commonality than there is difference.
I just think she's very difficult. You know, talk to anyone around Kemi. She is very difficult. She's not a warm, engaging, jovial personality. And Nigel is Nigel. You know, he's actually sort of very well. I barely need to describe it, but he's very ebullient. He's very outgoing. You know, he's up for it, as it were. He's just a big charismatic character, isn't he? And then you've got Kemi, who's very reserved, very careful, rather chilly. And I just think there's a personality clash there. That's not me saying he has told me that. It's what I observe. I know both the characters, and it's just not going to work, folks. It isn't going to work.
Well, let's have a listen to Kemi when asked by Jeremy Kyle in an interview here on Talk whether she would consider a coalition of some kind. Here it is.
If you envisage a position in 3 years' time where you're polling at a certain number and so Reform, would you, for the good of the country, get together with Farage and Reform to make sure we never have to deal with this shambles of a government ever again?
We owe it to the British people to make sure that we end this mess. But
I get that.
To spend more on benefits.
No, I get that. But would you not, in 3 years, to keep this lot out again, would you not say, I have to do right by the British people?
So that is what I can say. I will guarantee that I will do right by the British people. The best option is the agenda that the Conservatives have. Reform has a slightly different agenda. They say things, but they don't really understand. They don't do the work. They want more benefits. They're telling everybody everything. I'm not telling everybody whatever they want to hear. I'm being honest. And what I have said is that, local councils, you look for people who are going to deliver a Conservative agenda. That is what I promise people.
I mean, both figures in this, Isabel, Kemi Badenoch and Mr Farage, are not going to say anything different to that right now. But, of course, if push came to shove, and there we were, as you rightly said, faced with this coalition of doom of Plaid Cymru, SNP, Greens, your party, Labour, Lib Dem, goodness knows who else, thrown into the mix. If it was that, are you saying that uniting the right would be in the best interests of this country?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that anything other than that coalition is preferable. But when Kemi Badenoch said there, Reform has a slightly different agenda, no, Kemi, Reform has a radically different agenda to the Conservatives. The Conservatives are no longer conservative. They are, maybe they can do a deal with the Lib Dems. Maybe that's where they're headed. Reform it wants to change everything that the Conservatives did wrong during those long years of government, and that means trying to get a grip, indeed not just trying, but actually getting a grip of this mass uncontrolled immigration crisis. That's number one, and everything else stems from that. The benefits bill that Nigel's been talking about in the Daily Mail today, that is all of it is interlinked with the huge extra burden of population. So I think we've sort of covered that. What I don't want is some sort of suggestion that I'm backing a unite the right thing. No, personally, my politics are hardly any secret. I am backing Reform to win a majority. I think that's the only way we save our country.
But if it was, I'm not suggesting you, Isabel, from Nigel's perspective, if this poll was anywhere near correct and Reform came back with 188 seats, he would have no choice.
Well, I'm just not, at the risk of sounding like a politician, I'm not even going to go down that hypothetical, because we are potentially 3 years away, horrible though it is to think, we're potentially 3 years away from another election. You and I know that in a month, polls can look really different. All politicians are guided by polls, and there's no point in pretending they don't matter at all. But what polls say now is of virtually no consequence at all as to what they're going to say in 6 months, in a year, whatever. Reform could be up, Reform could be down, Kemi could be, she could have staged a bit of a revival.
Yeah.
I happen to think that it's going to be a very, very long time before most people who back the Conservatives would ever trust them again.
I wonder whether, Nigel Farage is a Conservative, as in the conventional sense of a Conservative, Richard Tice, former Conservative, etc. So would it not, in a curious way, be quite a positive thing? Get in there, rebuild the Conservative Party, maybe a few years down the line, rebrand it.
You are really labouring this morning, aren't you? What is it you want me to say?
No, I don't. No, I did say. I'm not saying this is your view, Isabel. I want there to be a government that's going to work, and if it's going to be fractured on the two major sides between the Tories and Reform, then I just simply can't see what option would be there. I know, like you said, you're correct. It's 3 years away. A lot of things could happen in that time. But I keep looking, every time I look at that list of the Rainbow Alliance of left-wing parties, I genuinely feel bilious. This is about my mental health, Isabel. That's why I'm labouring it.
I'm with you on that, and it's all very well for me sitting looking out on the nice sunny blue sky in a country that doesn't have any of these problems. I also feel bilious at what's happening to the UK and the thought of any of it getting significantly worse. My final word on this is there is a chemistry problem. I cannot fathom how Nigel Farage could work with Kemi Badenoch in number 10.
Let's move to another story which does feed hugely into this in terms of where parties stand on immigration. It's the front page of The Sun there. They're splashing with this. Migrant rapist was on the run for murder. This is one of three depraved, horrendous characters that were found guilty yesterday of raping a young girl on a beach. It's now come to light that one of them certainly came across the channel on a boat, which rather exposes the point that we've all been trying to make for many years, but was also on the run for murder in his own country. And it must, by any measure, throw up the I'm going to put this to Alf Dubs later as well. The concerns over small boats is surely more justified, more pressing and urgent than it's ever been.
And yet I saw so many people on the left on social media in the wake of this horrific case still saying, well, you do know that plenty of white British people commit awful crimes too, don't you? Oh. Well, yes, of course. Every society produces monsters. However well run a country is, there are always monsters. There are people who are depraved, addicted, deeply flawed. There are psychos in every society. But not every society chooses to spend billions of pounds of taxpayer money importing people of that nature. And that is what we are doing. We are importing more bad people. Of course, we've already got our own bad people. Yeah. We've also got good people, and there are some good people coming over the channel, without a doubt. And maybe some of them, a small number, will end up being net contributors to our society. But the reality is that we are importing murderers, and we are importing rapists, and we are importing people who come from such traumatic backgrounds. And I know this because we've spoken to them in the migrant camps in Dunkirk, people who've seen so much death and destruction around them that it has been normalized in their world. People from cultures where women are just seen as something other. You know, that women are not seen as, not even remotely equal. They are playthings or worse than that. We are importing these people without asking questions first.
It's almost as if we've been parachuted into some kind of bizarre, upside-down, Alice in Wonderland, perverse universe in the way this has been dealt with. I've made this case forever. If there's 100 men on a boat coming to the United Kingdom illegally, that is not the way to get to a country. If they're doing that, I am perfectly relaxed about somebody even believing that 98% of the people on those boats mean nobody any harm. They're not going to hurt anybody, but there will be 2% who do. The question is, we don't know who those 2% are. We have no idea which ones might be, and yet we are deliberately choosing to import that possibility into our country. In the same way that we lock our doors and windows at night, we don't believe that everybody in our street or postcode is a wrong and who's going to rob your house, but we know a small percentage might, so we lock our doors. It's a similar, and it's the analogy that fits with this one. I don't know why that is controversial. If 100 people jumped over the barriers at Gatwick Airport on a daily basis, we'd have press helicopters from across the world flying over the capital city to report on it.
Well, yeah. I mean, in America, they'd just be shot, wouldn't they, if they jumped over a barrier?
Yes, indeed.
An airport. Yeah. And frankly, you know, probably in other settings too. I'm not suggesting we go down that route. But you're right. I mean, I probably would say out of 100 on a boat, and we're just in the realms of speculation here, I would say I'm afraid it's probably nearer 5 to 10% who've got criminal, at least some criminal backgrounds. You know, that it takes a lot to get your way all the way from Eritrea or Sudan all the way to northern France. You've had to do some pretty questionable things along the way. But what I would say about the others in those boats is, whatever their sob story, and some of the, I'm not saying that some of those stories aren't, that they're real. You know, many of these people are coming from awful, wretched backgrounds. They are not in a position to contribute to our society. These people are not educated. They don't speak much English. In most cases, in the Calais jungle, in Dunkirk, these people don't speak any English. I know that because we've been there. We've talked to them. They don't speak English. They are low or unskilled people from very impoverished backgrounds. So, yeah, look, what are we? What is the UK? Are we just a giant charity? Is that what we've become? Because we all want to be nice. We all want to do right in the world, but no country can function happily and increase standards of living for all if it continues to import people who are dependent, wholly dependent on the state.
Indeed. Isabel, great stuff as ever. Thank you. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the warmer weather as well. Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor, with us on the show. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. Drop us a voice note there on the big subjects we're talking about this morning. This has come in from Sean on the small boat rape story. Let's have a listen to what Sean has to say. Morning.
Morning, Ian. Sean from Grimsby. After listening to the impact victim statement of that poor girl who got that gang rape down in Brighton, as a father of 2 daughters, it's absolutely horrendous. And it just proves how much of a joke of a country we are. You know, we can ban people like Kanye West and that Gomez woman from coming in, yet we can't ban a man from Egypt, and yet we can't deport him. It's just a complete farce. And I've never been one for the death penalty, but I think we need to start stringing these people up now. My mind's changed, and I don't really trust any of the governments to sort it out, mate. Awful, absolutely awful. Great show, mate.
Any minister, whether it's the most important one, the Prime Minister, lying to the House of Commons is a capital offence and would have to go.
A week before the attack, he was off to try and do a different attack, and he was eventually stopped by his dad. So the second time it happened, where they also knew he ordered a cab and took out a knife from the house, they never once called the police.
First rule of politics, don't slam the Pope. Don't have a go at the Pope, because you lose the Catholic vote at a stroke. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo. I like his brother.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Welcome back. Home of Common Sense, 0344 499 1000. Kevin says, Isabel Oakeshott needs to face reality. Reform can't win without the Tories. The alternative would be Labour and the Greens. In fact, according to this poll, the alternative would actually be a wider coalition, the likes of which certainly in this country we have never seen. Green, Labour, Lib Dems, SNP, Plaid Cymru. I don't think any of those parties would want to see that themselves. It would be absolutely chaotic. So you'd have every one of them looking for their own pet projects. That would be their red lines to join the coalition, and the SNP would be straight out of the traps by saying, yep, another referendum, please. If not, we're not joining your coalition. The Greens, no doubt, would have a to-do list longer than your arm of things they would want to see implemented before they would join it. And, of course, could a Prime Minister, which would be based on this, a Labour Prime Minister, but only just, could a Labour Prime Minister really govern in any effective way? I mean, we had the coalition in 2010. Did it work? Half work. It's more managerial, very temporary thing. No big fallouts. I'm sure behind the scenes there were many, but it's going to be a tricky one. But that's what that poll is telling us this morning. Immigration is likely to be right front and centre on everything that is discussed coming to the election. And yesterday, we know that riot-trained police will be sent to beaches in France as part of this new £662 million deal between the French and the UK. That's us giving France that money to stop illegal migrants from crossing the Channel. And fury has erupted over why a boat migrant murderer was staying in an Asylum hotel before gang raping a woman on Brighton Beach. There's a lot to look into here. But on that first point, the latest deal. Lord Alf Dubs joins us, Labour peer and a refugee campaigner. You've dedicated a lot of your life, Alf, I think it's fair to say, into this area. Good morning to you. Nice to have you with us. Just to give us an update. I mean, this is like an episode of, I keep saying it's an episode of Roadrunner, you know, where the character is trying ever more imaginative ways to suss the problem and fails every time. And here we are handing over another £662 million to the French. Will it work? And was it the right thing to do, Alf? Good morning to you.
Well, I think we've got to do a lot more than just what the Home Secretary said yesterday. Look, what we're talking about, whatever your programme said earlier, is the vast majority of people who are fleeing for safety to Europe are people who've fled from the most appalling circumstances of wars. I was talking to a Syrian boy some time ago. He'd had his uncle or father blown up in front of him by a bomb in Damascus. These are terrible situations people are fleeing from, and it is right that we should provide safety. Not only Britain, but other countries should as well. And I think that's the proper thing to do. Now and again, there's a terrible thing happens, and somebody who comes along is a serious criminal. We've got to deal with that. But the majority of asylum seekers that I know, and I've met quite a few of them in Calais and in this country, are people who simply want to get jobs, contribute to this country, and people who, if they haven't had their education, want to finish their education here in this country.
There does seem to, just to jump in on that point, Alf, there seems to be, and do correct me if there is evidence to the contrary, and I'm certainly not advocating this as a desired sort of centre-right opinion or anything like that. When I talk to journalists who go to the camps in Calais, they are not really getting that view any longer. Maybe once upon a time they did. It does seem to many that this is a system that is set up for people who understandably want to change their life. They might not like living in Iran. They might not like living in Eritrea, Albania, wherever it happens to be, but they don't tick any boxes for asylum status. They're simply paying a ton of money to somebody to jump on a rubber boat and make a new life in the UK. Now, I'm sure most of those people are legitimate, but the real sense is these are not refugees anymore. These are people who are attempting to get into another country to start again, as it were, to be generous.
Well, I don't agree. Admittedly, I haven't been to Calais for a bit over a year, but the people I've spoken to are people who've fled from the most terrible situations, from Sudan, Somalia, from the Horn of Africa, people who fled from Afghanistan, people who fled from Syria, which was still unstable then. And it seems to me that as a country and as a continent, yes, we owe something to provide safety to individuals who are fleeing.
They are in the safety of France, of course. You could look at it that way, Alf.
Well, yeah, there is a problem.
And probably previously Italy, Spain, maybe other countries too.
Well, it's a problem because we're not in the EU. Because when they enter the EU, suppose they enter the EU in Greece and in Italy, and they're fingerprinted and so on, then they can no longer claim asylum in France. And the only country they can come to is here. That's the stupidity of the arrangements we have at the moment. It's not our fault, that. Well, it is our fault. We shouldn't have left the EU. But that's for another...
But we wouldn't be... I don't think anybody seriously thinks that had we stayed in the EU, we would be returning 100,000 people every year.
Well, first of all, this government is already returning far more people than previous governments have, and they're stepping that up. And what we've got to do is to assess them as to whether they have a claim for asylum, and if they fail, then out they go.
But it's quite easy to pass the test. That's the problem, isn't it? So we don't have a legitimate, a sort of an intelligent way of determining this. If somebody says, I can't go back to Iran because, you know, I've become a Christian, there's no way of disproving that, or I'm gay. There's no way, and that's not a pejorative comment to spice up this conversation, Alf. It's true. You can't dispute someone's assertion that their sexuality is going to cause them problems if they return. So we're stuck.
Well, look, first of all, we have sent thousands of people back under this government, far more than under the previous government.
Well, only just, and I think those figures deserve a bit more scrutiny. But, I mean, there's always a natural return amount of people anyway. We don't hear a lot about it. But broadly speaking, you know, if you've got 60, 70,000 people, since Keir Starmer has been Prime Minister, coming into this country, economically, if nothing else, that has to be unacceptable.
Well, look, first of all, let's be clear. Let's separate asylum seekers from immigrants. Most of the people coming in this country are immigrants. They're not asylum seekers, but the pictures you're showing, of course, they are people who are going to claim asylum, but they're a minority of those coming in. So that's one part of the issue. So let's not confuse it. If people are coming as immigrants because we need social care workers, we need nurses, we need people doing jobs, then that's in our interest as to whether we have them or not. But if they're asylum seekers, they are people fleeing for their lives. And we do have an international obligation, which we should share with other countries, to provide safety for people who are liable to be murdered or killed in their own countries.
Just tell me this, Alf. Give us your assessment then, because you know this territory very well, more than most. So how does it work? These people get to France, which is in the EU. How did France get away with not putting those people into hotels in the same way that we ultimately put those people into hotels?
Well, first of all, the majority of asylum seekers who reach France, as far as I know, actually stay in France. The majority don't come to this country. It's the minority who make their way up to the Channel to see if they can find safety in this country. Look, some of them may be people who've got family here, and we have no safe and legal way in which people can get here. That's the problem. So they have to use these other means. I would like to see the boat stopped entirely, but I think we have to do that only if we provide safety for people to get here, so there are safe and legal routes for people of a genuine claim.
Even though this is your territory and you've been a long-time campaigner, and that's great, you know, we need people campaigning for all sorts of issues in a democracy, and it's great we can do that. But would you not acknowledge there is something almost... It would just be funny if it wasn't so serious. Something ridiculous that we have. You can have 100 men on a boat. We know nothing about them, where they came from, their background, their allegiances, their past in any shape or form. We take that risk every single day of allowing that cohort of people to enter this country to our cost, it seems, in many respects, looking at recent headlines, which I know you acknowledged at the very beginning, a migrant rapist who came over on a boat. All the while, we don't know which one is the migrant rapist. We have to stop those boats, surely, by any conceivable measure.
Well, that means we stop fulfilling our obligations to provide safety for people who are fleeing for their lives from other countries, from Afghanistan, from Syria, and from the Horn of Africa. These are people who've got terrible situations in their countries. And I think as human beings, we do have an obligation, not to harbour criminals, but we do have an obligation for people who want to contribute to our society and people who've got a genuine claim for safety. And we have to assess properly whether they do qualify as refugees under the International Geneva Convention. And it can be done. It's not as difficult as you're saying it is. We can do it, and where they fail the test, then out they go. And where they pass the test, we provide them with safety in this country. That's what we've done traditionally, and I think we should go on doing that.
How do you explain that to, and again, not a mischievous question, a genuine question, how do you explain that to a taxpayer, Alf, who's seeing handouts going to migrants? And I say handouts, I appreciate you get 39 quid a week, you're not living it up royally in a palace, but you are given accommodation, you're given a roof over your head, you're given 3 meals a day, you are safe, you've got healthcare if you need it, so you're fed, watered, and you've got a few quid for other bits and pieces. How do you explain that as a politician, as someone who's been around the block for many, many years? How do you look somebody in the eye and say, this is reasonable, we're going to pay for these people, we're not going to pay for you, we're not going to pay for your son who was in the armed forces who's now living in a shop doorway, but we will pay for people who jump on a rubber boat and come across the channel? What's your answer to that?
Well, we only do it to find time, so we have time to assess whether they have a claim to be here or not. And there's a fairly tough test on that, and it's up to the Home Office to make that test and continue.
But in the meantime, those people are left in a hotel at £2, £3, £4, £5 million a day, a couple of billion quid a year. I mean, even the economics, just the economic argument is persuasive enough, surely.
The meantime should be as short as possible. Exactly. We under the last government, it went on for years and years where people were here in hotels, which was not acceptable. Of course, what we've got to do is to assess quickly whether they have a claim for safety under international conventions. If they have that claim for safety, then they've got to be allowed to work, pay for themselves, which is what most of them want to do anyway. Most of them that come here don't like the idea of hotels. Most of them say, we want to have the skills to work. Some of us have skills, some of us don't. We want to develop the skills, and those that haven't had education want to get an education. It's a fairly simple request, and it's one which will help this country. It's not a damaging thing.
OK, final question. I've nothing to do with this. I'm bound to argue you're a Labour peer. It's been a rough old week for your party. It's been a rough couple of months. Some would say it's been quite rough since July 2024, but that's another argument. How is your man doing? How do you rate Keir Starmer in his job right now?
Well, I think on the overseas side, he's doing pretty well. He's been very sensible in keeping our alliances going, but in not getting us tangled up with fighting in Iran. So on that side, he's done very well. On the domestic side, I think he's doing better now. He had 1-2 hiccups at the beginning, and of course the Mandelson thing is a very big hiccup, which is a tragedy, really. We should never have got to that point, and he's apologised totally. But I think he's beginning to show that he's better on all fronts.
I'll leave it on that point. Alf, thank you. Lord Alf Dubs, thank you for coming on with us. Labour peer, a refugee campaigner. That's his territory. I mean, it comes under the bracket, if he would say that, wouldn't he? Because that's the turf that he is familiar with and campaigned on for years. But I'll let you pick apart the points that if you felt there was something I didn't challenge there, then throw it in. We're up for that. At this end, 0344 499 1000. You leave a voice note there on that very point and on Alf Dubs. Here comes one from Boz. Morning, Boz.
Morning, Ian. Breakfast team. Travelling Boz here. So you've just got that peer, Labour peer on. I mean, how blinkered are these people defending straight away? Oh, the majority of people I met, yeah, they're good people. They're coming over to make a better life for themselves. Listen, just look at what's going on. What's coming over? Check the boats. 100 people, 100 men. Any other country you go to in the world, they check your details. They fingerprint you. They photograph you. Here, they come over and they're just let loose on society. I'll tell you what, if you want to build some new homes for them, build them in the Islington area. And you'll soon see a lot of people saying, oh, no, we can't have that here.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And a nice swig of morning coffee. And a sneaky bite of a bacon roll. We're back. Ian Collins. Last day of a 2-week cover, more or less 2 weeks, shy of yesterday. Covering for Jezza, he's back on Monday at the home of Common Sense. David says, Alf is delusional. It's interesting to know where he lives and how much daily exposure he gets to the dross that we are paying for. We should not be the world's dumping ground. They contribute nothing and consume everything they can. No other country would put up with it. We've had enough. Well, the only area I'd part company on with what David said there is that pretty much all other European countries are in this position, but in varying ways. So France has most of those people that make their way to France, as the one thing Alf did say that was true. Most of the people that make their way to France don't come to the UK. They stay in flipping France. I mean, France have got an absolutely off-the-scale problem. But I don't know what they're doing with the people that stay there. They also get a bit more money in France as well. I think by about €10 a week extra here. But nobody can seem to solve this. Every single person is escaping a humanitarian crisis? Do you recognise that picture? That's the one that Alf Dubbs just painted for us. If you speak to journalists who are on the patch and have done their due diligence in this way, they tend not to believe that and being down there. I mean, I remember going to the, it was called the Jungle, wasn't it, at one point, down there in, is it Sangatte, I think, down there in, over there in northern France a few years ago. I also went, when I was working elsewhere, to Paris, and we did kind of a mini documentary on the issue around, you know, the tented communities under the arches in big parts of the capital city of France. Thousands of people, as far as the eye could see, were just there. It was just extraordinary. I don't know how many of those people were escaping a war, a tyrannical regime, or how many people just didn't very much like the country they were from and wanted to live elsewhere. And I think that last point, my experience, taking everything into account, slightly defines more the story of the truth of the story and where we're at. Now, the Tories have pledged to drop a blanket 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. These pesky things are all over but pedestrians can walk faster than your car. Widespread 20-mile-an-hour limits have been blamed for London in particular being the world's slowest capital to drive. The world's slowest capital. Tories say existing schemes will be reviewed, with 30-mile-an-hour limits restored where blanket approaches are widely ignored. Let's speak to our friend Steve Berry, journalist, former Top Gear presenter, with us now. Morning to you, Steve. Now, you cross a couple of areas on this because you ride a bike and you drive a car. So you've got sort of different sympathy levels, I suppose, on this one. But what we can all agree on is driving a car at 20 miles an hour is let's call it what it is. A royal ball ache.
Well, Ian, I've got a birthday coming up next week, and I will be 62 years old, which means I've been driving for 44 years. And I was thinking about my first car, which was an innovative car in its day, very radical, the Citroën 2CV. The first production car with radial tyres, which was a great improvement in car safety and pedestrian safety, because radial tyres were a lot better in the wet than they were in the dry.
Sure.
However, it did have drum brakes, which if anybody of a certain age remembers, drum brakes were all right as long as you didn't want to use them a few times. They were all right the first time you used them. The fourth or fifth time you used them and they got a bit hot, they were rubbish. So my point is this. In 44 years, I have seen incredible advances in car safety, not just for drivers and passengers, but also for pedestrians. However, if you'd asked me whether the speed limit would come down or go up back 44 years ago, I would never have imagined that it would come down.
Yeah.
And here's what annoys me. Bringing speed limits down completely ignores the massive improvements that manufacturers have made in safety for both drivers and passengers and pedestrians. It just says, we're not interested in that. We just want to take away a bit more of your freedom.
Yeah. And that's how it feels, isn't it? And, you know, you mentioned tyres and braking and things like that. If you extend other advances in motoring, you know, whether it's the way a car is overarchingly designed, the safety considerations that are within a car, the way that roads are built, barriers are constructed, signage, all manner of other things. I mean, you'd have to, I think, reasonably argue that it is monumentally safer to drive a car. In terms of all of those considerations, we can't take the human being aspect out of it, of course, but generally speaking, everything about car driving must be safer than it's ever been in the history of the car.
Yeah. And of course, one of the ways that they slow us down in towns and cities is to funnel us all along the same routes and to close routes. I live in Salford. The twin cities of Manchester and Salford, they can be confusing for people, but it's very simple. On one side of the river, it's generally Salford, and on the other side of the river, it's Manchester. But you can be looking at, like, Manchester's main thoroughfare and be in Salford, because they're that literally cheek by jowl. There was a way to get from the ring road that takes you out to the motorway into my bit of Salford.
Okay.
They closed it, and they didn't close it by going to the law and going through the process.
Yep.
Yeah, they closed it by putting up a big whacking great yellow gate across the road with no signage saying, oh, by the way, if you use this fairly wide road to nip up there, you can't do that anymore. But we haven't bothered with all of that nonsense of actually putting in all the appropriate laws and what's not. We've just put a whacking gate across the road and went, oh, you can't go up there anymore.
Yeah.
Unless you're on a bicycle or you're walking. So they've reduced the speed limit. Yes, they've reduced it by saying 20 mile an hour in towns and cities, but they've also reduced it by just closing off all kinds. I was in my hometown. I live in Manchester. I'm Bury, just up the road, 8 mile up the road. Bury's traffic's now like Naples or Cairo. I was in an old car yesterday, a classic car, 32-year-old MG, and it's got a bit of an overheating problem. So I've been to see a specialist, and I thought, I can't leave until the traffic dies down, because if I get stuck in traffic in this lovely old car, I'm probably going to blow the head gasket. So I had to wait for the traffic to die down. I had to wait for like 3.5 hours.
Wow.
It was 10 to 7 in the evening.
Yeah.
And the traffic in a small town like Bury, Lancashire, was absolutely gridlocked at 10 to 7.
It's nonsensical. I was in Manchester yesterday, strangely enough, Steve, and I was talking to the cab driver. You always get a good gauge from a cab driver. I did make the fatal error, perhaps, of just saying to him, so how are the roads in Manchester these days? Because we've been talking about the mayor and different and trams and goodness knows what else. And he was off on a 20-minute rant. And what he said was brilliant. He was talking about all the things you've just talked about, just the nonsensical measures that nobody can wipe, the disproportionate use of cycle lanes that he's never, ever in his life seen anyone in. I mean, goodness me, the list goes on. Listen, Steve, we have to stop there for time. You've been brilliant as ever. Steve Berry, former Top Gear presenter, with us here on the programme. Always good to gauge his views. 20 mile an hour zones are we all get it. I know everybody says the same thing. If it's outside a school or a hospital, yeah, 20 miles an hour makes a bit of sense. So many areas where you think, what's the purpose of this 20 mile an hour thing? And of course, you're cameraed wherever you go, so you can't even like tap your foot a couple of mile an hour over, even, because you're going to get nabbed and nicked. The digital police will send a little ticket to you, sliding through your door about 10 days later. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. Let's go back to the mega poll we talked about. Reform can only form a government if they get into bed with the Tories, according to one poll. Here's a voice note from Ian. Morning, Ian.
Morning, Ian. Ian from Hemel Hempstead. Listen to Isabel. It's not a chemistry problem between Nigel and Kemi. It's an ego problem. I like both of them in certain ways, and I think they could both lead. But I also think that they need to get their heads together. Maybe not now, but they've got to keep an eye on what's going on, because bilious is absolutely the words for a Green coalition. We can't have that.
I hope I wouldn't have used that. Well, certainly I don't remember trying to get any job for my mates.
Can you get a job? Can you help get a job for ex's mates? But don't tell the Foreign Secretary.
I don't think it's completely surprising that the Prime Minister would be so sensitive about the way in which he was dealing with a member of his senior team, and particularly a director of communications who's in minute-by-minute contact with the media, that he would want that kept to a very, very tight group of people at the time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back. Home of Common Sense. Ian Collins for the last day in for Jezza. He's back on a Monday. There's so much going on. I mean, the contributions from our audience on this stuff. This doesn't happen anywhere else, OK? Literally, there's nowhere else. They will tell you, oh, it's all about the listener, the interaction. No, it's not. I promise you, this is the only place where you get true interaction, whether it's in voice notes and calls and conversations, where you're included in the debate about whatever the issue might be with the big players that might be with us in the studio or wherever else. So thank you to everybody who makes this place the growing success that it is. Grateful to you on that. We'll keep those comments coming in. We've got so much. And, of course, it's down to great contributors as well, like James Ball, the tech journalist and author. No show will be complete, or no fill-in on a breakfast show will be complete without James joining us. Morning, James.
Good morning.
Nice to have you. Did I build you up a bit too much there, do you think?
It's lovely to hear this time of morning.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
It's not bad. I'm a man of many compliments. And we wanted to talk to you really about this story, about sharing data with China, because, of course, this is forever. This has never really gone away, this story, and the question mark. But curiously, it sort of gets a bit of a free pass. We talk about it. We get very animated. Oh, they're sharing data with China. And then we don't talk about it anymore. Who knows what is going on? But we know there has been a data breach. This is very serious territory. Tell us more about this story and why we should be concerned, James.
So this UK biobank is a real kind of treasure of British research. Health data is one of our real strong points. We've got an NHS, we've got lots of records together, and the biobank is volunteers who've also submitted their DNA. So this is really, really personal information. This is GP records, health data, and your literal DNA, which you can't change. It's not like a password. Yeah. And there have been scandal after scandal about it being pretty easy to get hold of it for different researchers. So, you know, I think we have talked before about it being shared with China and worries about what the Chinese government might do with some of this. But now this has actually been found on Alibaba, which is basically Chinese eBay. Some of this data has been sold. Not quite people's names and addresses, but people's health data along with their month and year of birth. And it is not that hard to match that to people. So this is pretty bad. And it's exactly what they've been warned could happen time and time again. So it's really frustrating to see this. The worst has happened.
Of course. But the bit that intrigues me, I'm trying to work out what somebody does with that data. I mean, if they looked at, you know, somebody's got on their medical records, they've got a bunion on their foot, and this comes under the desk of a Chinese spy somewhere. He's going to be looking at that. Mr. Brown in Lincolnshire has a bunion. We'll use that against them when we're... Well, I mean, what do they do with that information?
It's obviously, I think a lot of this is just going to be boring to a spy agency, but there's quite a lot of health data that can be a bit incriminating. So let's say that you're in a heterosexual marriage and you're taking PrEP. Yeah. That might be a fairly good sign that you're blackmailable because PrEP is a HIV prevention drug. Yeah. Similarly, if you've got a sexually transmitted disease, if you've had treatment for gonorrhea or chlamydia or something, that can show up in here. There might also just be signs that certain people are sort of have genetic diseases, and so they might be targeted by snake oil sort of salesmen. Someone might pose as a scientific researcher with a new cure, say they need tens of thousands of dollars, and if they've got your medical data, you might assume they're real and they're legit and they're offering you false hope. So
That does happen.
There's blackmail, there's scams, there are quite a lot of nasty ways this could be used, even if for a lot of people it's not going to be anything more exciting than a bunion.
Yeah, that's very true. There is a woman near me who apparently claims she can cure cancer with Chinese seaweed. So you're right, there is that kind of sort of herbal market that maybe it's ripe for that. But you sort of wonder en masse, or is it symbolic in the Chinese just getting hold of stuff? Any data, as we now know, we see it if you sign up to, the newsletter of your local parish council. They want all manner of information, that gets put somewhere. So the more you get, you build a bigger portfolio. Is that likely to be the overarching kind of interest?
I think there's sort of two factors. Sometimes China is just another country that's doing things that we might want to work with them on. Medical research is something that we tend to collaborate on. Yep. That happened in COVID. But sometimes the Chinese government is up to things. TikTok, there's questions about influence. Yeah. And in this instance, it's that the labs haven't been holding it. It being sold on Alibaba is a sign someone's cashing in, someone's on the black market.
So if your bunion makes a meme on TikTok, you'll know what's happened. Listen, on that point, James, we've got to stop. James Ball, tech journalist and author with us on the programme. Let's get the latest news headlines. The time on Talk is 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to provide the House with information that I now have about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to the United States. But, Mr. Speaker, before I go into the details, I want to be very clear with this House that while this statement will focus on the process surrounding Peter Manson's vetting and appointment, at the heart of this, there is also a judgment I made that was wrong.
The name had been submitted to the King as Minister's recommendation. The Prime Minister had made an announcement that Mandelson was his nominee without caveats. The British government had sought agrément, the formal diplomatic process for a host government accepting a nominee from the US government, and that had been obtained before I arrived in post. A position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
This was not due process. Everyone knows the price of misleading the House. Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility and go?
Yeah! Mr. Speaker, let's be absolutely clear. Before Mandelson took up his post, UKSV recommended with red flags that clearance should be denied, and there was high concern that was not brought to my attention or the attention of the Foreign Secretary at the time or subsequently is a very serious error of judgment. She rushed to judgment as she always did, just like the Iran war.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk Breakfast. Yeah, morning. Ian Collins in for a final day for Jeremy Kyle. He's back on Monday. So much to get through here this morning. We have been responding to the headline that many Reform voters might not want to see. Well, I say headline. It's a poll. I know polls, schmoles, they change, they differ. We pick which bits we like. We reject them when we don't, etc. But this one suggests that Reform would need to have an alliance with the Tories to govern as British politics fragments. This poll suggests that Reform will get 188 seats at a general election if there was one tomorrow. Not far behind the Conservatives would get 159. So you're talking about just sort of 30 seats or thereabouts in it between the two. They would have to join forces. They would have no other option but to join forces or face this situation, the Rainbow Alliance of the Left. That would mean we would have a coalition government that would be the Greens, Labour, Lib Dems, SNP, Plaid Cymru. More or less, something of that order. I mean, that would be chaotic, just even if you are a left-wing voter. I don't think anybody would desire that. It would be chaos, and of course all of those parties would just simply submit their pet projects as a red line to join the coalition. It would be a nightmare for anybody to govern that. So with all of that in mind, would you rather that the Reform, bearing in mind loads of people, lots of you listening to this, were Conservatives and legged it from the Conservatives because you didn't much like what they were doing and felt they weren't very well Conservatives, went to Reform, felt that that was more like a cosy pair of slippers, somebody put it the other day. It was the true Conservative Party, if you like. How would you feel then if that party, Reform, then jumped back into bed with the very Tories that you just left? For some, it's a no-brainer. It's the way forward. For others, it's a problem. We'll speak to Joe Twyman in a second, who is a pollster himself, founder of Delta Poll, who can shine some light on how some of these things work. First, Anne Widdecombe, former Home Office Minister. A great example case, I guess, Anne, and good morning to you, of someone who was, dyed-in-the-wall Conservative all your life. You served in government, you campaigned, you couldn't have been, you were the, if you like, the archetypal Tory. And yet, even you found it a place that you could no longer feel comfortable in and crossed the line over to Reform.
Well, in fact, originally I crossed the line over to the Brexit Party.
That's true. You take the point. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, yes. And now, and when the Brexit Party morphed into Reform, I did hold off for a couple of years before finally joining. And that's because I was looking to see if the Tories were going to learn anything, and they didn't, and they still haven't. Now, I think very, very strongly that this business about unite the right is a mirage, quite honestly. Because if you look at, if I can quote another opinion poll, if you look at the Ashcroft polls, there was one done on precisely this. Mm-hmm. And what it showed was that 21% of Conservatives, 21% of supposed Tories, would actually prefer that rainbow coalition that you've talked about.
Wow.
To a coalition with Reform. Yeah, I mean, it was there. And I think it was something like 53% actually preferred, whether they still do, I don't know, but then preferred Starmer to Farage. Now, this is only a few months ago.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm tired of hearing this about we can't do it without the Conservatives. Yes, we can. Anybody looking at their policy should just announce with a great fanfare today that, Kemi Badenoch is going to scrap 20 mile per hour. Sure, but we said that a long time ago. And, they play catch up with us the whole time, and we need to really, really emphasise that. I still think we can do it. We have 3 years to go. Now, if we get big success in the local elections, as I believe we will, we can build on that and build on it. And I don't think for one moment that there is anything impossible about Reform getting an overall majority. But let's just suppose for a moment that it didn't. There is no right-wing party for it to link up with because the Tory party isn't right. A large chunk of it is left. And therefore, the only way I could see this working would be literally to pick off MPs and to say we will coalesce with these because they will support our aims. But we're not going to be dragged down by left-wing Tories.
I mean, a couple of points on that. You're absolutely correct to identify that point, and that it's we focus a lot on the headlines of people like yourself, Suella Braverman, Danny Kruger, who've shifted from Conservatives to Reform. But you're absolutely bang on. If you go down to Westminster tomorrow and bump into the sort of Rory Stewarts of this world, they would be... the idea that the Conservatives would join Reform is so abhorrent that they would be more likely to support that bizarre, frankly unworkable, but that wouldn't stop them, that coalition, rather than Reform. That said, your second point that I thought was interesting, there is no other right-wing party. Well, of course, the Conservatives did get into bed with the Lib Dems in 2010. So even if you saw the Conservatives as a bit of a left-wing, not really left-wing, but centre, more not as left-wing as a Labour party, but certainly not as centre-right as a Conservative party should be, that would surely still be the go-to option for Nigel Farage if he didn't get a majority.
Well, as I say, I think it would be a question. The only way we could possibly do it and not be dragged down by the Tories left wing and not have every single policy that we tried to implement with a rebellion and all the rest of it. The only way we could do it would be if we literally cherry-picked the right-wing MPs. Now, that has not been done, to my knowledge. But that would be the only way that I could see forward. But I refuse to concede defeat. I mean, you're talking as if we can't get an overall majority. Yes, we jolly well can. And yes, we jolly well will. So stop talking about uniting with the useless Tories.
Yeah. Well, I'm reflecting the poll, nothing more than that, as you know, Anne. But I think what's interesting about this, though, is it possible that this could actually be a bigger story in a way that isn't really being talked about? And that is that people like yourself, Nigel Farage, Richard Tice, all former Conservatives, could join up with the Conservatives and almost start to rebuild the Tory party again, even to the point that, 5 years down the line after the first Reform government, they could even change the name back to the Conservatives, so, sure that they're in the right skin now. Would that not be the wider plan, the ideal plan?
I don't think so. I think the plan has got to be to replace the Tories, because all the things I've already been saying to you, you talk about taking over the Tories, remoulding the Tories. Yeah. There is that huge rump of Tory left, and it is big. It's not a small one.
Yeah.
When you get to a party where more than half of their voters say, well, they would actually prefer a Labour Prime Minister to Nigel Farage, you're talking about an absolutely hopeless venture. We will win in our own right.
And it's always great to get your views specifically on these kind of things as well. Thank you for joining us, Anne Widdecombe, former Home Office Minister, former Conservative, now a Reform member and proud of it, thinks it can still be done. Let's get a word with Joe Twyman, founder of Delta Poll. Morning to you, Joe. Welcome to Talk. Look, I know this is a different organisation that carried out this poll. Electoral calculus were the ones behind this. How does it sit within the kind of patterns that you've seen over there at Delta Poll when it comes to where Reform sit, majority governments, predictions, in bed with the Tories or not, as the case may be? Do you recognise this poll in any shape or form?
Well, there are very good methodological reasons to doubt whether a poll of this size can actually predict with any kind of accuracy individual constituencies. What that means is there's
which is what they claim, I think.
Yeah, there's a large margin of error, and those errors may cancel out. But I would have deep reservations about attaching too much importance to a poll such as this, particularly at this stage in the electoral cycle. Having said that, it's clear that it is reflecting the broad trends that we have seen in the national polling, all of the national polling now for some time. The polls have consistently shown Reform ahead, and often by some distance. Reform have been ahead in every published poll since the local elections last year. Yeah. And so they are clearly in the ascendancy. But in a situation where you have constituencies that could be fought by 5 parties, perhaps even 6 parties, all of whom have a chance of winning, it then gets very complicated because every vote will count, and you could have a situation where a party could win the seat on 23% of the vote. And so therefore that margin of error that I talked about becomes very important, as does tactical voting. Yeah. And these types of polls, in fact all types of polls at this stage, cannot take account of hyperlocal factors, including tactical voting, which we saw at the last election was very important, and at the next election could be even more important.
How significant is May the 7th? I know it still means we are kind of, 3 years away from a general election. May the 7th is just around the corner. A lot of mood music around that Reform are likely to do well. Although I have noted, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, it was suggested quite regularly up until quite recently that Reform will take Wales. Now, that would have been totemic in terms of the wider electoral statement that it makes. That seems to have shifted a little bit.
Well, Reform support nationally has, generally speaking, fallen back since the turn of the year. They're still ahead, but their lead isn't what it once was. In Wales, that situation is even more substantial. But it's also worth pointing out that relatively few polls have taken place in Wales, and polling Wales is difficult because the population is so much lower. But May the 7th, there's no doubt, is important. It could arguably be the most important set of elections that we have between the two general elections.
Yes.
We have the Welsh Senedd, we have the Scottish Parliament, and we have all 32 London boroughs, as well as many other parts of the country. And those are important because all of them are heartlands that are important for Labour if they are to deliver at the general election. And so if Labour lose in Wales, get trounced in Scotland, and then see the rise of a progressive left Green vote in London, it raises real questions about where their majority, or indeed their minority, comes from at the general election.
I mean, I would also say, coming second, if you're Reform and it's Wales and Plaid Cymru romp home, as an example, Reform comes second, Labour third, Tories fourth, something of that order. I mean, that is still seismic for Reform, isn't it? I mean, the significance of that, a party that has half a dozen MPs and didn't even exist half an hour ago, to be coming second in the entirety of Wales would be massive.
Yeah, I mean, with local elections, you can always point to positive stories, regardless of which party you are. Yeah. But certainly, that would be an extremely positive story for Reform were it to happen. And also, the electoral system in Wales means that it's very, very unlikely that any party will get a majority. True. And so that means inevitably there will be coalitions in government, and that places all parties in a more powerful position as a result. And so certainly it will place Reform in a strong position in Wales, from which they could build a strong position across the rest of Britain.
Indeed. We are now less than 2 weeks away. What is Delta poll telling us about those local elections right now, Joe? Overridingly, what is the general picture?
The general picture is that Labour are going to take a kicking. It's difficult to see where the positive story for them will emerge. Yep. The Conservatives may do well, may pick up some places, but from a very low base. But I imagine the main talk will be about Reform and the Green Party, these two parties outside the mainstream that could make significant gains right the way across the country.
Indeed. Joe, thank you. Good to see you again. Joe Twyman. He is, of course, the founder of Delta Poll. It is kind of interesting, the territory we're in, the two-party politics that we've had for literally forever has just been completely smashed, hasn't it? We can all agree on that, whether you're left-wing, right-wing, whatever. That has gone. And parties rise, it seems, very quickly. Reform have an obvious springboard from which they began their campaign, which was Brexit Party into Reform. But the Greens, I mean, the Green Party, no, I think still to this day, if you went out with a clipboard and asked people, do you know who this is, and showed them a picture of Zach Polanski, I don't think most people would have a clue who it was. The Greens were kind of that curious little contingent that had one or two MPs. People talked about it. According to this poll, they're going to get 71. Big appetite for 71 seats at a general election. Big appetite on the left for Green over Starmer. Now, I can get the anything but Starmer thing, but what gravitates someone to a party and a leader that they, in all probability, know very little about. Back with your calls, comments in a couple of moments' time. We've got lots to talk through here. Lines are open. Let's get a voice note. This comes from Laura. Morning, Laura.
Morning, Ian. Great show. I've clearly woken up extremely grumpy this morning, so I'm resending you my voice note. So far, I've had issues with every single one of your guests. First of all, Linda, whose suggestion was that everyone who attended university was highly educated and highly intelligent. I don't think that's right. Isabel, she doesn't normally irritate me, but she did this morning. Reform needs to work with other parties on the right-hand side if they really care about this country. They really do. Anyway, and your last guest, Lord, whatever his name was, just deluded, and he's part of the problem. He seems to think it's okay for these poor people to come over. He didn't mention the fact that the majority of them are men, and we don't know who these people are until they're processed. He's right; they need to be processed, and if they're not able to contribute anything to our society, then bye. Yeah, that's it. Great show. Thanks. Bye.
The handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. Despite this atmosphere, an atmosphere of pressure, the department completed developed vetting to the normal high standard. Because the vetting process is not there to determine fitness for office or reputational risk, it's there to protect national security.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
21 minutes after 8 o'clock. Good morning. It's Ian Collins in for Jezza. Jezza is back, of course, on Monday. Loads to get through here. 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. The lack of, frankly, any kind of care for who arrives in this country. Reference the migrant rapist story, which is just beyond disturbing. But to many of you out there making the not unreasonable point, kind of inevitable. So we have that as well. And that megapole. The megapole. Are we going to unite the right? Is that the idea? What about that rainbow coalition of left-wingers? It's an interesting time. Kevin Hollenrake is the Conservative Party chairman. Kevin joins us now from Westminster. Morning to you, Kevin.
Morning.
Nice to have you with us. Yeah, all right. So are you sharpening up, getting ready in your shadow cabinet meetings for that coalition with Reform?
No, we're not doing that. Kemi Badenoch's been very, very clear that we will fight for every single vote in these local elections on all the way through to the general election in 2029. There's no deal to be done. There's not two Conservative parties out there. There's one Conservative party led by Kemi Badenoch, and we're confident we can get back on top.
Yeah. But of course you can't, can you? I mean, that would be unlikely to do that. So it's your opportunity here, Kevin, to just fess up and tell it like it is. You will have to do a deal with Nigel Farage.
Well, Nigel Farage is a one-man band. That's the reality. So
well, it's not, is it? I mean, they've got, got half a dozen MPs.
Off reform.
They're ahead in every single poll.
The gap, I think you'll see the gap in the polls has narrowed significantly over the last few months. And Kevin now is the most popular leader in the country. We're the most trusted party on the economy yet again. We're the most trusted party by business. We're winning by-elections, local election by-elections up and down the country. And I'm on the doorsteps every single day, as I was yesterday across London, in Enfield, in Barnet, in Chingford. People like what Kemi Badenoch has to say and likes the new Conservative Party under Kemi Badenoch, and we're very keen to make our case. That's what we're focused on doing, and we've got a clear plan to cut the cost of doing government in terms of cutting stamp duty, scrapping stamp duty completely for households, for people moving house and buying their first home, cutting business rates for our high street businesses, for our pubs, our restaurants, and cutting the cost of doing government and welfare to pay for all that. We've got a clear plan, and people like what we have to say.
Are you saying that when you knocked on all those doors in those areas, Kevin, and you know what electioneering looks like, and, you know, handing out a leaflet and asking people whether, that no one said to you, sorry, Kevin, I'm voting Reform?
There were very few yesterday, I've got to say. We didn't, and we had lots of volunteers out yesterday. We just not something we were hearing. I'm not saying some people aren't voting Reform or thinking of doing. Of course, that is the case, but that seems to be, their support seems to be diminishing, and that's showing on the doorsteps, is in the polls as well. So we've got a lot of work to do to rebuild trust between ourselves and the public. We did many good things in 14 years, but we made some mistakes. Now, Kemi Badenoch is a different type of leader altogether. She's got the backbone, she's got the courage of her convictions. She says what she means, and she means what she says. And the more people see that and see our plans to control migration, stop those small boats, all those things, cut legal migration, that's what we've got a clear plan to do. Come out of the European Convention on Human Rights to make sure we can deport people who arrive here illegally and hit people who already arrived here illegally. Those are all our clear plans, Kemi's plans, and people like them.
The Tories used to say, of course, they'd never form a coalition with the Lib Dems. I mean, that would have been unthinkable, wouldn't it, in 2010? The Lib Dems and the Conservatives, who could ever envisage such a thing? And then, of course, it happened and stayed there for 5 years. So coalitions can work from the Conservatives' own position. Cameron and Clegg prove the point.
Well, I say our policies are completely different from Reform's. They've got these unfettered spending plans. I mean, look at the Reform Manifesto 2024. It had £140 billion of spending promises, annual spending promises. They've now completely scrapped those plans. That included the cost of increasing the cost of benefits. So you'll see Reform grab lots of headlines, say things people want to hear. Nigel Farage, good communicator, but he's that one-man band. So Kemi's got a properly thought-out plan. If people want a leader that properly considers policies, properly makes sure that those policies stand up to scrutiny, and then announces them, and make sure they're deliverable, then they need to back Kemi Badenoch. I believe we can get back on top, and I honestly don't think Nigel Farage is interested. He'll be interested in the world of British politics if he can't become leader of this country, and I don't think he can.
Kemi Badenoch was asked this question about coalitions with Jeremy Kyle when she appeared here on Talk. She said she would do right by the British people when asked. So that would suggest, and I know it sounds, Kevin, like I'm labouring the point, and you're probably thinking, I can't wait to get on to the next interview. But just for the purpose of this, it is an interesting headline. If we believe this poll, where Reform come back with 188 MPs at an election, which is incredible for a party that only has half a dozen to start with. And you guys come back with, I think it's 159 in this poll, which isn't that far behind, by the way. Both parties would be in an irredeemable position where they would either go, no, we're going to leave it to the Rainbow Alliance of left-wingers to form the next government, or we're going to get together. Let's be honest here, Kevin Hollinrake. You're going to get together, right? You're going to have... I know hypothetically you don't want to. I know in your heart you don't want to. If that very scenario faced you tomorrow morning, you would be in coalition with Reform.
Well, Ian, we don't want to and we don't need to. You said it all in terms of that poll. Look at that number of seats. That's gone up massively from where the polls were 6 months ago. So we're making big progress. All we're focused on is fighting for every vote, every ward, every seat. That's what we are interested in doing. And people can see that the Conservative Party is a completely new party under Kemi Badenoch. They say she's the most popular leader in the country, way exceeding the popularity of all the other leaders, including Keir Starmer and Davey, of course, and Nigel Farage. We're just focused on that, fighting that fight. So I don't think there's any need for a coalition. And I've seen that, I've heard Kemi say that many, many occasions on various programmes she's been interviewed on.
We spoke to Anne Widdecombe. You remember Anne Widdecombe, of course, Kevin. She's now one of those that crossed the line over to Reform UK. She's convinced that Reform are going to do this outright anyway, so it wouldn't need the pesky Tories to prop them up in any shape or form. She also suggested that the Tories are nicking policies from Reform, the latest being the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit suggestion, scrapping those. Reform had already announced that, she said.
Well, listen, Anna's is entitled to her own view, of course. I think we see it the other way around. Reform talking about benefits today. Nigel Farage started cutting benefits, but only a few months ago he was looking to lift the cap on the two-child benefit cap. So you see, I think it's the other way around, actually, because what we do is put out detailed policies. For example, another example is our policies on controlling illegal migration. We set out a clear plan to come out of the ECHR, to have the third country deterrent, or the Rwanda-style deterrent, detention, deportation. Nigel Farage, first of all, said he was going to tow the boats back to France and then discovered he couldn't do that and then copied our plans. So listen, we will always do what we think are the right things to do in terms of serving the country, making sure we have a strong economy, making stronger borders, leader with backbone. Those are the kind of things. We're focused on what we do or our policies are, but we've got to make sure those policies are deliverable before we announcement. And that is in contrast, in my view, to all the other parties.
But this 20-mile-an-hour thing, which is of interest to a lot of people because it does frustrate the life out of many drivers, that was announced by Reform at the beginning of this year. It's been announced by the Conservatives yesterday.
Well, it's something we've objected
that's straight
to.
political theft, isn't it? You've literally nicked a policy.
Labour government introduced it some time ago. We objected to it. Our colleagues in Wales objected to that, and Darren Miller, and we were very clear that that's the wrong thing to do. So we've long been against blanket 20-mile-per-hour schemes. We're not against specific roads where there are accident black spots or there are schools or hospitals, those kind of things. It may be appropriate, but we get some councils and some governments, in the case of the Labour and Wales government, who introduced it as a blanket. We think that's entirely wrong.
Kevin, thank you very much. Finally, just before you go, I just got to ask you one quick question, Kevin. Keir Starmer, he's had a bit of a rough week. It's not been a great time to be either the Labour leader or probably in the Labour Party. Do you think he'll survive another week? There's talk of him going even before the May elections. Your thoughts?
Well, your political career comes to an end when you have people around you, your own colleagues, decide it's time to go. And we are seeing a number of Labour MPs. We've seen Graham Stringer, I think, and Jonathan Brash have called for him to go. Sarah Champion was very critical of him the other day. I mean, I've got to say his problems are of his own making, both in terms of how he's managed the economy, wrapped business up in red tape, these constant U-turns, and now this complete debacle over Peter Mandelson. So I personally think he probably won't go in the next week or so, but I think his time is limited, and I think it will be very soon after that.
Kevin Hollinrake, thank you very much for your time, sir. Kevin Hollinrake, MP, chairman of the Conservative Party, with his thoughts on where this whole story is likely to go next. No deal with reform. It's always a bit weird, isn't it? Is there a name? The Germans have probably got a very long word for this because they tend to do that. A name where somebody denies something that will absolutely definitely happen should the scenario occur. So he's denying it, and Widdicombe's denying it. If there was a kind of split between the right, as in the Conservatives, and Reform, got a similar amount of votes at a general election, would they get into bed together? Now, the answer is yes. The answer has to be yes, unless you are going to end up with all of the people, and I know there's some, you know, some almost Lib Dem types in the Conservative Party, but the option would be to have the Greens and Labour and Jeremy Corbyn and co in a kind of coalition. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn could end up being the sort of pivotal casting vote in a kind of coalition of the left. So would the likes of Reform and the likes of the Conservatives seriously say, look, between the two of us, we've got enough to form a majority and a healthy majority government, but we're not going to go with that. We're going to get Jeremy Corbyn and co to run the country. It's kind of unthinkable. So if that scenario exists, Kevin Hollinrake is saying, no, we would not do a deal. We don't need to. We won't need to. And Widdicombe, for Reform, is saying, no, we would not do a deal. But, of course, in that scenario, I don't think you'd have any choice, would you? It's genuine. I can't imagine there is any, even if you want there to be. Of course, we'd all desperately want it to be different. If that was literally the scenario, what else would you do? 0344 499 1000. Let's get a voice note on all of this. Responding to Kevin Hollinrake, who we just spoke to, the chairman of the Conservative Party. This comes from Adam. Morning, Adam.
Hi, Ian. See, this is just arrogance of the Conservatives. Oh, you know, Kemi's doing this, Kemi's doing that. Why would you keep voting for somebody that failed, that had a majority of 80 and did nothing and made everything 10 times worse? I'm not going to go back to the Tories. I will be voting Reform at the next election, 150%, because I want something different. I'm fed up of the old two parties. Anyway, mate, great show.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back. 25 to 9. It's the home of common sense. Ian Collins in for Jeremy Kyle. So much going on in the world of politics domestically, across the world as well. Only one person to speak to on this. That is John Rentoul, chief political commentator at The Independent. John, morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
Lots to, I mean, it's worth just majoring in for a second on that mega poll. I know polls come and go, and we kind of... We pick and choose depending on where we sit politically as to which poll we like and which one we don't. This one, I think, does throw up something that I think most of us think this could literally happen, whatever the specific numbers of this poll show up. But a situation that arises if there was a general election tomorrow, the vote on the right is split between Reform and the Conservatives, and they've got one choice. They either join together or they allow a five-party left-wing coalition to take over. Which one are they going to go for?
Oh, they'll definitely join together, but Nigel Farage is not going to say that until after the election, because he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to encourage people to think that they can vote Tory and get a reform government. I mean, that's what he doesn't want. But you're absolutely right, Ian. I mean, opinion polls are at this distance from an election. They're interesting, but they don't tell you what's going to happen, except that, as you say, we have a five-party system now, and so it's very unlikely that any one party is going to get a majority of the next general election. I mean, whatever happens in the next 3 years. So we are looking at some kind of arrangement between Reform and the Tories. And the interesting thing about that, of course, is that the Tories have not been squished in the way that Nigel Farage was hoping they would have been by now. They're still, they fought back quite strongly under Kemi. Yeah. So they're still there, and he's probably going to have to do a deal with them after the election, or we'll end up with some kind of coalition of Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, that kind of thing.
I mean, that would be. I mean, just picking on that last point, John, I mean, the idea that you would have and something that has never happened in this country before, a coalition of Green, Labour, Lib Dems, SNP and Plaid Cymru. I mean, if you want a definition of a political mess, that's it, isn't it?
Not at all, no. I thought that was a realistic option after the 2010 election. I thought Nick Clegg really showed his colours then when he went into coalition with the Tories when an alternative was available. But I mean, we're arguing about ancient history there, and the precise details are obviously that's sort of almost like just rolling a dice. As to which arithmetical combination is possible. But I would have thought, in broad terms, I would have thought a Labour Lib Dem or Labour Green Lib Dem sort of arrangement is quite possible at the next election.
Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting to see that sort of.
Well, yeah. I mean, if people think a Labour government's bad, I mean, wait until they see that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be all over. I mean, the rise of the Greens is kind of. I mean, we constantly talk about the rise of Reform, which, by any measure, is extraordinary. That a party that. I mean, even before the last election was riding high. I mean, that was extraordinary in itself. I'm just talking not because it's Reform, but because it's a new party.
It's a new party, yeah.
And now it's got sort of half a dozen MPs thereabouts, and they're predicted to potentially win the general election. I mean, we've never seen anything like this before, but the Greens are kind of doing a similar thing on the left now, aren't they? I mean, according to this poll, they get 71 MPs. I mean, if you went out onto the streets and said, what do you think of Zach Polanski? Most people would go, who?
Yeah, absolutely. Although he's gaining recognition, undoubtedly. I mean, I think his sort of Corbyn tribute act is actually attracting quite a bit of attention among the sort of people who voted for Jeremy Corbyn in 2017, 2019. But you're right. I mean, it means that we are in what I think is a rather dangerous situation where the next parliament could consist of very, very large numbers of essentially paper candidates, people who have very little political experience. And that's going to be quite a big experiment in the sort of weird democracy that some electoral reformers want to see, which is you get just ordinary citizens into government and let them try and sort things out. But I mean, I don't think that's going to end well.
Let's talk about Keir Starmer. It's not been a great week for Keir Starmer. If I was to be completely objective, it might be argued that it's been a better week for Keir Starmer than he thought it was going to be. Would that be fair?
Well, I think he felt he was on quite strong grounds at Prime Minister's questions, in that he felt that Kemi Badenoch's attack on him had sort of fallen short, because embarrassing as Ollie Robbins' evidence to MPs was, Ollie Robbins did essentially say that Keir Starmer was telling the truth, that he did not know that there had been these doubts raised about Peter Mandelson's security vetting. But, I mean, I think that all that does is draw more attention to what an embarrassing mistake it was for him to have appointed Peter Mandelson in the first place.
Yeah, that's fair, isn't it? But, of course, he might not have known from the off, but he would have known from last September when journalists were phoning number 10 or contact number 10 saying, we've heard this about the security vetting, unless he didn't read the front page of The Independent the next morning or he didn't listen to the point being raised in Parliament and no one else in Downing Street did, then Starmer must have known slightly earlier than last Tuesday.
Well, absolutely. He knew that was an issue. But I mean, his line is that the Foreign Office kept on telling them, no, it was Peter Mandelson's security vetting clearance was perfectly normal, nothing to see here. Let's move on. And so I mean, his line is, I was bamboozled by the Foreign Office just as everybody else was. It's not a great defence for a prime minister.
And surely, John, he would have, if he knew he was going to say time and time again, this is going back to when he was making those press conferences in Downing Street or wherever else it was, but certainly in the House of Commons, if he was going to confidently stand there and say all the usual systems were in place, a protocol was followed, etc., you might think that a lawyer's brain would have said to his advisors before he uttered those words, can we just double check all of this?
That is the extraordinary thing. They did not ask that question energetically enough. I mean, they just said to the Foreign Office, "What's the story?" The Foreign Office said, "Oh, it was all done as usual." Yes. And that's undoubtedly a failing, but it's not as great a failing as the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson in the first place.
Well, that will
which yes. I mean, I thought Keir Starmer, when he started his statement on Monday, he said, that was terrible. I apologise again to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I think that should have carried more weight than all this sort of processology about 100%. What happened since.
And even if, just to push it even further, you would have said, well, let's take Epstein out of it, because you can keep doing this with the game of Mandelson. It's like a sort of Russian doll that you keep. There's another layer there every time. Even if you took that out of it, you could go, well, he was fired twice and his nickname was the Prince of Darkness, so maybe he's not the bloke to appoint an ambassador.
Well, except there was an argument at the time that that's precisely the sort of person you want as an ambassador.
Well, yes,
someone really a bit
of a renegade, bit of a.
Someone who is really been through a lot of political shenanigans, knows how to deal with the Americans, was capable of doing the sort of deal with the Trump administration that actually, to be fair, Peter Mandelson did. I mean, he did actually protect us from the worst of those tariffs. But who knows whether Karen Pierce, who he replaced as ambassador, could have done the same thing, because she was highly regarded by the Trump administration as well.
Patrick Maguire in The Times says today that the Cabinet knows that Starmer is done for. Are you picking that vibe up? Dan Hodges says it's a question of not if, but when Starmer goes. Your thoughts on all of that, John?
Well, everybody's been saying that for some time now, Ian. Since January, since the sort of the Mandelson thing came back for I can't remember whether it was the second, third, fourth time. And Morgan McSweeney had to go. I mean, that people have been said it's a question of when, not if. But when is quite an important question, because when could be any time between now and the next election. I think it's extremely unlikely that Keir Starmer is going to be leading the Labour Party into the next election, but he could survive for some time. As Prime Minister, because as long as Angela Rayner looks like the likely winner of a leadership contest, I think Labour MPs are going to hold back.
And understandably so. John, thank you very much indeed, as ever. John Rentoul, he is, of course, chief political commentator over there at The Independent. Thank you to him. 0344 499 1000. Maggie says, what is Kevin on Kemi? Maybe the most popular among Tory voters. I think that's meant to say, what is Kevin on? Kemi may be the most popular among Tory voters, but definitely not throughout the country. I see he's repeating most of Reform's policies. They did nothing whilst they were in power. We mustn't forget it was the Tories that started putting migrants in hotels. I still think, and Maggie is bang on, that we've changed the leader. So Kemi Badenoch was never the leader. she's got a different view from the administration she previously served in, like Robert Jenrick has got a different view. He moved parties completely. So she is entitled to move her party on. But has the rest of them, is the mindset of the Conservatives, has that been so substantially changed that you could say, OK, this is a clean brew? You know, everyone's allowed a second go, even if it was a high-risk strategy. But it was only, less than 2 years ago we had an election. So have things changed that much in the Tory party in that time? Let's get a voice note on all things Tory-related. This comes from Dave. Morning, Dave.
Morning, Ian. Dave from Malden. Just been listening to you chatting to Kevin, the Tory chairman. What an absolute ignoramus, nasty. Just the man's talking tosh, absolute tosh. Calling Nigel Farage a one-man band, calling Reform a one-man band. Can he count? Because I think they've got 5 MPs, haven't they? So he ain't a one-man band, is he? And he's got enough people behind him, clever people in that party that aren't elected yet, who will absolutely wipe the floor with the Conservatives. Yeah, they've got brains. They would change the face of politics. I voted Tory all my life, except for the last election where I voted Reform.
The handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. Despite this atmosphere, an atmosphere of pressure, the department completed developed vetting to the normal high standard. Because the vetting process is not there to determine fitness for office or reputational risk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Morning, Ian, says Rob in Portsmouth. Reference the 20-mile-an-hour limit. I'd definitely be up for that in London, as it would speed things up. It's just carnage out there. I had the classic kind of, was it a triple whammy or a double whammy? So I had to go to Manchester yesterday, and or was it the day before? Day before now. So I went on Wednesday after the breakfast show. So I had the tube problem, because I know this is a London story, but it's got significance all over the place. I had the tube problem, but I managed to, it was all right. I got on a tube, I had to wait much longer than you'd normally wait for a tube, but I got on one. Everything was fine and dandy, get to Manchester, all tickety-boo, start to come home from Manchester. And there's a big incident, what by all accounts a slightly horrific incident, and that's a very horrific incident that happened between Milton Keynes and Euston. So nothing was leaving Manchester. So there is a way to get to London. It has to go to Leeds first. So I thought, OK, I like Leeds, I'll go to Leeds. So I'll get on a train, but that's going to be about, hour and 15 or something, Manchester, Piccadilly to Leeds. And then I'm going to go to King's Cross from Leeds, eventually that train around. But it did elongate the journey by about 2.5 hours because of the gaps between waiting for the next train. So that was, and then I get back into King's Cross down in London, and I think, do I take the tube or do I take a cab? Spoke to a cab driver, and he said, mate, it's going to probably take you about 40 minutes. Now, for those who don't know the geography, King's Cross to London Bridge it can do on a busy day. Of course, you can take anything in a capital city. But I thought, I'll risk the tube. So I had this double bubble of doom that you've got the roads clogged up because of the strike. And because of the strike, the tubes aren't working. And even those that want to take a bike couldn't get a bike because everyone else was taking a bike. There's no buses because they're part of the strike. And this is the 21st century we're in. And nothing is working. The national train's knackered. I had to go across half the country just to get home. And let's remember, by the way, Manchester to London is just over 2 hours away. It's about 2 hours. Fast train, 2 hours, 7 minutes. I've done it so many times. So it's nothing. So bicycles, buses, tubes, taxis, national rail, all kaput. The whole thing, the knock-on effect was absolutely vast. So you're absolutely right, Rob. 20 miles an hour would have been a joy yesterday. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Kevin, who's in Leicestershire. On polls, Kevin, what are you making of it all? Good morning.
Morning, Ian.
Hiya.
Nice to hear the housewife's choice. Nice to hear your voice, mate. I'm going to keep this pretty simple.
Do any housewives still exist, Kevin? There's a good question.
Well, I'm sure they do.
In the conventional sense, you don't have to. Well, yeah, there's probably some. You don't have to go to work. You just keep the house nicely. I always used to think, when there was a big agitation that, there was a lot of inequality in the country and, why are women not at work in the same way as men? It's only fair. And I used to think even then, I wasn't around really even then as an adult, but looking back at that, even then you'd have thought, sorry, isn't being a housewife quite a good gig? You literally don't go to work.
They would argue they work 24.
You can have the right. Well, no, I'm saying I'm not suggesting if you had to pay the archetypal housewife chores by the hour, the hourly rate would be massive. So I get them. I never thought it was I didn't think it was an inferior position. Put it that way.
I've got 4 sisters, and I'm going to struggle to respond.
Yeah, you are. Otherwise, you won't get any Christmas presents come December.
You got it.
Anyway, polls. What are we making of this reform and what's happening with this potential, based on one poll, to be fair, the potential of having to get back into bed with the Tories? What are you thinking?
I don't believe it. I know the poll might be an accurate poll, however it's tested, but if you remember when reform first started and when they didn't have 8, correct some of the other people, 8 MPs, when they didn't have that many, they were flying up the polls. And then if you look what happened, the media absolutely went mad at Nigel Farage, throwing everything at him. They couldn't throw any more dirt at him. And I actually think, because they knew they were so far away, they've spent the time doing the dirty work, getting the councillors sorted, and they've backed off a little. And if you notice, it's maybe Robert Jenrick or some of the others, they're Yusuf, who are coming out and doing a lot of the talking now. Mm-hmm. And the polls might have steadied a little bit, but I believe come the next general election, they'll if they start canvassing again, they'll soon storm back up there. Look, I travel all over the country. Everyone I speak to, and I appreciate I don't speak to everyone, but they're predominantly working class or management level. Everyone I speak to, they just say, I'm going to vote reform. Yeah. I don't hear anyone say
it's genuinely a common response. And I would say way more than, and I'm being completely neutral in saying this, way more than any other. I never hear somebody go, I'm going to vote Lib Dems or I'm going to vote at a general election. This is, I just don't hear that.
No, I don't. I think the only way this will happen, a bit like the Lib Dems and the Tories, is basically, I don't think they'll do a pact before an election. I think Nigel will try and win every seat, as will Kemi. But
and then they'll see how it pans out. Listen, Kevin, I've got to run because we're nearly hitting the clock. You've been brilliant. Thank you, Kevin, and say hello to your sisters as well. Kevin in Leicestershire with us on the programme. 4 minutes to 9 o'clock. Let's get some sport.
90 minutes in 90 seconds. From The Sun.
Joining us, Martin Blackburn, Northwest reporter, sports reporter for The Sun. Martin, morning to you. It's interesting, London clubs, there's always a bit of a rivalry. It was only half an hour ago that Chelsea fans were going, look at Spurs, they're about to go down, and they fired a manager. Fast forward a few moments, Chelsea fire a manager. What is going... Chelsea going the same way as Spurs here?
It's been another chaotic week, hasn't it, Ian, at Stamford Bridge, and of course they're building up to the semi-final of the FA Cup, which is becoming an increasingly important game for them this Sunday against Leeds.
Yep.
Our story on the back is that Bournemouth manager, Anthony Iraola, is somebody that Chelsea would be very interested in talking to, but he's going to play hardball with them a little bit. He's in a great position, Ian, because he's leaving he's leaving Bournemouth this summer.
Yep.
He knows that there's going to be a lot of clubs who are interested in talking to him, so he's quite happy to sit tight for a little while.
It's interesting. Look, I know it's been an interesting season when you look at positioning in the table, and just one win and a couple of teams above you, one loss or even a draw, and it flicks back up again. Chelsea can't really make it into the top four as far as I can see here.
Well, it's going to be top five probably, Ian. There's probably going to be 5 Champions League places, but
they might just nick 5th.
They might do, yeah. But they're going to have to turn things around because it was a disastrous run of form under Liam Rosenior, and they've got a lot to do, And it may be that the FA Cup could possibly put a bit of a better slant on their season.
Yeah, well, when you can't beat Wolves, which literally happened this season, there is a problem. Let's just move to a quick United story. Roy Keane's future son-in-law been revealing what the United hard man is really like. What did we learn?
That's right, Ian. Yeah, I mean, if we've all been there, haven't we? Trying to impress the potential in-laws. But what if your father-in-law was Roy Keane? So, and also this lad Taylor Harwood Bellis, he actually played for England last season. People might forget that he also came through the ranks at Manchester City. So. As if it's not hard enough to impress Roy Keane, he also played on the other side of town. But he's going to be going up against City this weekend in the FA Cup semi-final, and he'll be out to impress, because City decided that he wasn't good enough. So great little interview with that one.
Indeed, it's a fabulous interview in The Sun today, and of all father-in-laws you wouldn't want to upset, I think Roy Keane would be top of the list. Great to have you on as ever, Martin. Thank you, Martin Blackburn, Northwest reporter, sports reporter with The Sun. We're going to take a short pause for some news headlines. 0344 499 1000. Let's get the latest news at 9 o'clock here on Talk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to provide the House with information that I now have about the appointment of Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to the United States. But, Mr. Speaker, before I go into the details, I want to be very clear with this House that while this statement will focus on the process surrounding Peter Manson's vetting and appointment, at the heart of this, there is also a judgment I made that was wrong.
The name had been submitted to the King as Minister's recommendation. The Prime Minister had made an announcement that Mandelson was his nominee without caveats. The British government had sought agreement, the formal diplomatic process for a host government accepting a nominee from the US government, and that had been obtained before I arrived in post. A position taken from the Cabinet Office was that there was no need to vet Mandelson.
Mr. Speaker, I know many members across the House will find these facts to be incredible. To that, I can only say they are right. It beggars belief that throughout the whole timeline of events, officials in the Foreign Office saw fit to withhold this information from the most senior ministers in our system in government.
This was not due process. Everyone knows the price of misleading the House. Will the Prime Minister finally take responsibility and go?
Mr. Speaker, let's be absolutely clear. Before Mandelson took up his post, UKSV recommended with red flags that clearance should be denied, and there was high concern. that was not brought to my attention or the attention of the Foreign Secretary at the time or subsequently is a very serious error of judgment. She rushed to judgment as she always did, just like the Iran war. Mr. Speaker, I was elected by the British people because they let the country down for 14 long years. Whatever she says, whatever noise they make, nothing is going to distract me from delivering for our country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk Breakfast. We will talk a little bit more about thefts in supermarkets because apparently the head honcho of M&S, Archie Norman, has said like a lot of... for some reason, a lot of middle-class people are accidentally stealing stuff. You're not really accident, you're just nicking it, OK? I don't know how they determine class based on swipage unless it's the kind of thing you're buying. So maybe if you're purchasing a tasty kumquat, then the theory is you're probably maybe demographically middle class. If you are, I don't know, if it's McCain oven chips, maybe you're not middle. I don't know how they're working it out. Archie Norman did say, almost a get-out-of-jail-free card for thieves, said that some people are doing it because they're in a hurry. I've never gone into a shop to do my shopping and gone, do you know what? I mean, look at the clock, at the time, I've got a train to catch. I know what I'm going to do because I'm in a rush. I'm going to nick my shopping. That's never occurred to me. I'll just thieve all this food because of the 420 leaving on platform 1. That's never occurred to me. Apparently, it's a bit of a thing. Thoughts on that? Also, that headline this morning that may not please Reform voters, according to a poll. This is a bit of a mega poll, as they call it. They've tried to drill down into constituency by constituency. Reform cannot win an election on their own. They would have to hop into bed with the Conservatives. How do you feel about that? You might be a former Tory voter that legged it to the green grass of Reform UK, only to discover they might have to dip their toe back into your old party. This poll suggests Reform will get 188 seats at an election, not enough to form a government, so therefore they would require the help of the Tories, and they would get 159. That's very close, 159 to 188. And if they didn't do that, it would leave the door wide open for a rainbow left-wing coalition of, frankly, a coalition of doom, which would be the Green Party, Labour, Lib Dems, SNP and Plaid Cymru. They would not get a thing done. That coalition would last about 45 minutes. There'd be a massive fight, and then it would all start again. Let's get a word on the big stories. Annabelle Denham is with us, senior political commentator over there at The Telegraph. Annabelle, good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. I mean, polls come and go, of course, and it's always interesting how the polls can differ depending on which newspaper they were in or which organisation has commissioned it. So if a left-wing, the RSPCA, for example, never ever commissioned a poll that told us that people are kinder to animals than they've ever been. We always get one that says, there's more cruelty out there and, we need to do more for animal welfare. So polls they have a bit of bias in there somewhere, don't they?
Well, Ian, I hope you're not suggesting that there might be leading questions offered by charities in order to perhaps justify asking their supporters for more money. But no, you're right. There can be variation from one poll to the next. And we have to remember we are still 3 years out from the next general election. Yeah. There's a huge amount that can change. Reform have achieved the impossible almost over the last couple of years. I don't think even Nigel Farage expected that they would be leading the polls consistently for well over a year now, 28, 29, 30%. But they've got to find a way to hold on and to maintain that momentum until we go into the next general election, which won't be easy for them. Now, May the 7th could be quite an important marker for Reform in that regard. Yep. But we'll see what happens and really whether they are able to keep going, to stay leading the polls throughout the rest of this year and going into next, and then next year's elections when they take place. So, you know, in some ways you have to take polls with a pinch of salt with that in mind, that sort of medium to longer term perspective. But I think for some time now, it's been my feeling that many voters on the right of British politics would like to see some signal that Reform and the Tories are willing to work together.
Yep.
And they certainly haven't had that yet. Now, I wonder whether Kemi Badenoch, her heart might sink when she looks at this polling, because she's really strengthened her position over the last 6 months or so, ever since she gave that barnstorming speech at Conservative Party conference in October, and since Robert Jenrick left the party, Suella Braverman defected to Reform. But I wonder whether being so resistant to any suggestion that there be a pact at some point or that these two parties work together might go against her. Then again, Nigel Farage has been no more accommodating of this idea. So, you know, let's just see whether the pressure does begin to mount on these T leaders, whether they feel as though they are going to need to find a way through. But, you know, let's not forget that Nigel Farage had his fingers burned in 2019, and he has made no secret of the fact that Reform partly exists in order to destroy and cannibalise the Conservative Party. So it's quite difficult to see a way forward.
Indeed. It's worth having another listen to this as well, Annabelle. This was Kemi Badenoch speaking with Jeremy Kyle here on Talk Breakfast on this very point about whether she would consider a coalition. Let's have a listen.
If you envisage a position in 3 years' time where you're polling at a certain number and so Reform, would you, for the good of the country, get together with Farage and Reform to make sure we never have to deal with this shambles of a government ever again?
We owe it to the British people to make sure that we end this mess. But
I get that.
To spend more on benefits.
No, I get that. But would you not, in 3 years, to keep this lot out again, would you not say, I have to do right by the British people?
So that is what I can say. I will guarantee that I will do right by the British people. The best option is the agenda that the Conservatives have. Reform has a slightly different agenda. They say things, but they don't really understand. They don't do the work. They want more benefits. They're telling everybody everything. I'm not telling everybody whatever they want to hear. I'm being honest. And what I have said is that, you know, local councils, you know, you look for people who are going to deliver a Conservative agenda. That is what I promise people.
That's what she promises people. Interestingly, Annabelle, this morning we spoke with Kevin Hollenrake, the chairman of the Conservative Party. He was unequivocal. No, we would never get into a coalition. And Widdicombe for Reform was also with us. She said the same thing. There should be a word for this thing. I said earlier, I think that the Germans have probably got a very long word for something like this, where you are adamant on something, but if that something arose, your position would completely change. Because if Reform were faced in a position of getting 188 seats and the Tories had 159, are they both seriously going to sit there and say, no, we won't do business with each other, bring on the socialists? I can't imagine that.
Well, it was the economist John Maynard Keynes who said, when the facts changed, I changed my mind. And for a long time, you know, Reform have really believed that they can get to that golden number 326, that they will be able to command a majority in the House of Commons. As we approach the next general election, perhaps if they do start to see a consistent dip in the polls, if at the end of the day, in our multi-party politics that we're now living through, which is going to throw up, you know, so many chaotic election results, if all of the parties end up at or around 20%, and there will be variation there, I think it's entirely plausible that Reform will be in the mid to higher 20s, but, you know, if the Tories are catching up a little bit, you know, we are going to have to see some coalitions being formed, some pacts being agreed. But a problem that's facing both sides really is that there are a lot of Conservative voters out there who are probably choosing between the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats when it comes to the next general election, who will not to put Nigel Farage in number 10, who will not want to see a Reform government. Now, similarly, there will be the Reform grassroots who despise the Tories, who feel totally betrayed by their 14 years of government, particularly when it comes to immigration, who wouldn't countenance the idea that those two parties have worked together. So, you know, as I say, we're just living through a very unstable political moment, and it'll be some time, some general elections, I suspect, before the dust really settles, just like we saw a century ago in the 1920s.
It is curious, and I've never quite understood those journeys that people, in the same way I don't understand why lots of people who would have been Conservative in July 2024 suddenly voted for Keir Starmer. I don't know how that happened, but it clearly must have done in some cases. The Lib Dem thing I find even more curious. Where I live in leafy Sevenoaks, which is it's always been a Conservative MP forever. You know, you could put a blue rosette on a chimpanzee and it would get elected at a general election in Sevenoaks. However, come any election, the place is littered with Lib Dem signage. I mean, somehow, you get the people who've got the little poster in their window, and then you've got somebody who's got that great big poster right across their wall. There's loads of those, and I said to somebody a couple of years ago, I said, so you vote, this was a kind of dinner party thing, you vote Lib Dem? Yes, always voted Lib Dem, darling. Why the Lib Dems? I don't know, but we've always voted Lib Dem. So you don't know, but you'll vote. What is it about the Lib Dems that somehow mesmerised a certain subset of people in Sevenoaks, for goodness sake?
Well, Ian, I live in Hertfordshire and it's slowly turning orange. So at the 2019 general election, we saw Anne Main lose in St Albans to Daisy Cooper, who's now deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats. Yeah. And in Harpenden and Berkhamsted, which was a News constituency formed after the boundary change, Bir Mafalami, who had held much of the previous constituency and was a Conservative MP, yep, lost to Victoria Collins. So we are seeing that trend north of London as well in the home counties as well.
Indeed. I mean, nothing wrong with, if the Lib Dems are the party for you, that is fine. It's a democracy. I just don't get the journey from Conservative to Lib Dem. That, to me, is unfathomable. It doesn't seem to make any sense. It would be as weird as going from the Greens to Reform.
Well, I think what the Liberal Democrats do at general elections, and they're quite smart here, is they make it all hyper-local. So what they will do is they will leaflet like crazy, campaign like crazy. They've got a good number of foot soldiers, and they will convince people that they will act locally in their best interests at Parliament level. And they're also very effective, usually, at clinging on to the seats they do have, like barnacles on a ship. Yeah. And, they will campaign, they will divert resources and campaign very heavily in places that they have either already won or places that they think that they can win. But let's not forget that, in the nationwide polls, Ian, they're only polling at around 12%. And what's extraordinary in a way is that you're seeing all of these fluctuations and all of the other parties moving a little bit here and there. And the Liberal Democrats just cannot seem to gain any ground. Now, my suspicion is that it's because they're not particularly liberal, nor are they particularly democratic. And Ed Davey, who leads the party, really only seems to be able to differentiate himself from Labour on the issue of Donald Trump. But now that Keir Starmer has torpedoed that relationship with the White House, there isn't that sort of orange water between the Lib Dems and Labour. Now, the Lib Dems have, of course, been pretty robust on the Mandelson scandal. But again, I think people will feel that for a long time, all they've really done is cheer Labour on from the sidelines.
On that point, Annabelle, great to have you with us. Have a cracking weekend. Thank you. Annabelle Denham, senior political commentator at The Telegraph, with us on the programme. Thank you to her. Back to you. More calls and comments coming in on that sort of the idea of a coalition. Did you hold your nose and go, OK, we'll do it? Would it be the most abhorrent thing? Would you not even vote for either the Tories or Reform if you thought one was going to jump into bed with the other? On the point of the megapole, let's get a voice note. This comes from Mark. Morning, Mark.
Mark from Bridge North. Sunny. Looking forward to the weekend in Tenerife. Only a quick one on the Conservative chap who's just been on. Delusional again. Not to admit they'd have to go in a coalition is ridiculous because they're never going to win on their own. They had their 14 years. I know it's a cliche to keep saying it, but they had their 14 years to do it. Why didn't we leave the ECHR then? I don't know. We still had thousands of people coming in. They're just talking the talk now because they're out of power and they got their nose smacked in. OK, mate. Have a good one.
handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. Despite this atmosphere, an atmosphere of pressure, the department completed developed vetting to the normal high standard. Because the vetting process is not there to determine fitness for office or reputational risk, it's there to protect national security.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning. Last 45 minutes even. Ian Collins in for Jezza. He's back on Monday here at the home of Common Sense on Talk Breakfast. A reminder, by the way, your favourite TV show from the 90s is back. Chris Evans, TFI Friday, have returned to their original home of Channel 4 for the next 5 Friday nights at 11 o'clock. If you're of a certain vintage and you remember TFI Friday, I mean, I genuinely... Quite genuine. I know we work with Chris now in this building, but that aside, genuinely cannot tell you what an appointment that was to watch. I mean, it was, if you weren't in, you'd record it. Everything about it, in the same way as, and this is obviously, there's the Evans theme, Big Breakfast, and then, of course, don't forget your toothbrush, all within those kind of genres previously unexplored, where people would say, I've never seen anything quite like this. It's doing stuff that I didn't think TV did. And it became just such an incredible watch. And it was so comfortable. And, you know, when the series finished, you'd think, no, I can't, I want this to be there. My appointment to watch every Friday evening on Channel 4, there it was. Well, it's back. Tonight, Channel 4, 11 o'clock. It's the reimagined for 2026 by Virgin Radio UK. TFI Unplugged features A-list interviews, music, classic bits from TFI archives 30 years on. 11 o'clock tonight, Channel 4. This week's guests include Chris Marshall, Emma Laird. From the archives, Paul McCartney is in there as well. It's an absolute belter. Our Chris Evans is there this evening at 11. Let's move to David Wooding, columnist at The Sun. David, morning to you.
Good morning.
How are you?
Very well, thanks. And I'm sure, Keir Starmer and his cabinet, they're all thinking TFI Friday as well.
Yeah, for very different reasons, with a slight different acronym. You're absolutely right. Your column in The Sun today, yes, Prime Minister, you're finished. It's sort of, you've kind of reimagined that particular sitcom. Lovely little picture that the photo boys knocked up for that column with Keir Starmer along with Sir Humphrey and the like, in Yes Minister, because we're in that territory, aren't we? This
Absolutely.
is exactly where we're at, and this is what it seems his own cabinet are now thinking.
Absolutely. This was spawned from me watching the various exchanges we've seen over the last week. First of all, there was the Prime Minister facing the statement and all those questions for 2.5 hours on Monday. And then we had Sir Ollie Robbins, Rockin' Robbins, in the before the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and then we had Prime Minister's questions. And listening to the answers to all the questions, it was like an episode of Yes, Prime Minister. Long-winded, obfuscation, not answering the question, all about process, when the bottom line really is that Keir Starmer hired Peter Mandelson to be the ambassador to the United States, despite knowing that he had business links with China and Russia, and that he was friends of a jailed paedophile millionaire. I mean, all these questions about who knew what and who said what and who put pressure doesn't really come into it. But nevertheless, that's exactly what happened.
And it's interesting that what it's done, I mean, Starmer will think he's kind of just about got away with it this week because of this to and froing, and Ollie Robbins kind of confirms that the Prime Minister might not have known. But I think that we should go back to, and very rarely will I utter this sentence, arguably the best question in that debate came from Diane Abbott when she said, you know, well, OK, he didn't know, but why didn't he ask? Because that would have been easy. And even when they were sending him out into the TV and radio studios to bat for his team on this, Starmer kept saying all due process was followed. You would think a forensic legal brain like Keir Starmer would have cleared it up with his team. Right, I'm about to say we crossed ticked every box here, dotted every I, crossed every T. Can we be absolutely sure everything was done? Would he not have asked that question? Would he not have bothered to get to the nitty-gritty of that? But he largely feels that he just about got through it. But what it's done is it's returned to the top of the agenda the original question of why on earth he would have appointed Peter. They went through all of this for Peter Mandelson, for goodness sake. The bit they did know was that he was friends with a convicted paedophile. Absolutely.
All these responses we've seen do not actually address the issue. He's spinning on the sixpence here, trying to come out with all sorts of explanations as to why he hasn't misled Parliament or whatever. The bottom line is that he appointed this man, and it was a massive error of judgment. Don't forget, Ian, it's not all over yet, because next week we've got Sir Philip Barton, who was one of the two sacked undersecretaries at the Foreign Office. He was fired by Keir Starmer before Sir Ollie Robbins was fired. Don't forget, he's also fired 4 chiefs of staff. No, two chiefs of staff, 4 heads of communications, and everybody's been thrown under a bus apart from Sir Keir Starmer himself. So we're going to get Morgan McSweeney up, and then Sir Philip Barton, both of whom will probably, I think Sir Philip Barton is going to be the difficult one, because he was the man who would have been put under pressure to allow the appointment of Mandelson, even despite the vetting being negative.
Yeah, we'll see. There is another witness, potentially. Don in Chelmsford raises this point. He says, Ian, I've noticed Mandelson has been featured in newspapers walking his dog. I think that dog might have important information and should be questioned. What do you think, Dave? Because if anybody knows the inner workings of Mandelson, it's that dog. Does he change his dog regularly? Because I'm sure that's not the same dog I saw him with recently. Has he got a couple of these beasts?
Well, I think the other dog failed vetting, so that's probably what happened there. I mean, I don't
change the dog.
Well, they've thrown everybody else under a bus, so why not the dog as well?
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to the fact that these are dumb animals. They're quite clever and know what's going on. The only thing protecting them is that they can't speak, but maybe they might bark some revelations out for us all.
Mandelson in those pictures is walking around with one of those big tennis ball throwers as well. I don't know how he's maybe just been over to Regent's Park because he's in that vicinity. I'm not revealing anything there, so he's probably taken the dog over there. The dog, it's a beautiful dog, by the way. It does look like the kind of dog you'd see on Blue Peter just before they retired it.
Yeah, absolutely. Get down, Shep, as I remember from old John Noakes. Maybe we should get the dog before the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, see what he has to say.
It's probably a traumatised dog. It's probably met all sorts of shady characters over the years of its poor life. It's probably sat there, broken bread with Jeffrey Epstein, goodness knows what else. I mean, the poor thing is an RSPCA case waiting to happen, Dave.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We'll watch with interest. Interesting front page of The Sun today, going right to the heart of what is, I think, still going to be at least one of the top 2 issues, along with welfare come the general election. The migrant rapist who was on the run for murder. I mean, this just really goes back to the very essence of the question of channel migration. You know, if you've got 100 blokes on a boat, even if 99 of them are sound, one of them isn't. We just don't know which one it is. So we're being asked to play Russian roulette every single day in this country. This was one of 3 young men, animals, who gang raped a young girl on a beach, found guilty yesterday, and it's now been revealed that one of them at least came over on a boat, and one of them, the same guy, was wanted for murder back in his home country.
Yes, absolutely.
What the hell are we doing here, Dave?
And he was he had his asylum claim rejected.
Yep.
But nevertheless had mounted an appeal. So I think Shaban Mahmood, the Home Secretary, is right to be considering streamlining the process so that they only get one go at this. But of course, you'll have all the refugee charities coming out saying, "Oh, you know, the system is too slow. It's nothing to do with the appeals process. People have to have an appeal." But the facts don't bear this out. 25% of people who committed rapes and crimes in this country were foreign nationals.
Yes.
These are people who've been convicted of those offences. So it raises the question: who are we letting into our country? And the answer to that is we don't know, because these people are coming in undocumented through illegal routes. And you know, we talk about Peter Mandelson and vetting. These people are not vetted in any way, shape, or form. We haven't got a clue what their background is, and we've only just found out that this chap from Egypt, who turned out to be a brutal rapist, was running from a murder charge in Egypt. So what are we doing? How are these people being allowed in and being allowed to roam free? If he'd been on a murder charge in Britain, he'd be in prison.
Yes. I mean, this is the
he's allowed to roam free.
It is. These kind of stories are so disturbing, Dave. They're so disturbing that you kind of, part of you wants to think somebody just made this up, and it can't possibly be true. That this is what we're doing as well, day in, day out. Today, the weather is great. The English Channel will be calm. There'll be another couple of hundred guys coming over. I would firstly have my eye on anyone who's come from Iran. At the moment, we are at war with these people, with an Islamist regime, and yet we're importing people from that very country without any questions being asked. No passport, no papers, no details of their background. In you come, guys. The Four Seasons is just up the M20. I mean, that's literally, no exaggeration, no party political point, no hyperbole. That is literally what we're doing.
And if your viewers and listeners care to read the story, I mean, I'm not going to say it here on breakfast television, but it is truly horrific. The details of this case are absolutely unbelievable and shocking. And that's only the stuff that we thought was fit for printing. There's stuff that was said in court that is just too grim to include in the newspaper.
Indeed. And just very finally, a lot of talk as well this morning. The Tories are going to scrap 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in certain places. They're also going to get very busy and big on potholes. I thought this would appeal to you, David. Julie Brooks says, just an incidental matter, Ian. Could you ask Kemi's Pothole Patrol to visit Leafy Sevenoaks, please? The roads are some of the worst that I travel along. You and I know that territory very well, David. I mean, look, it's not just the roads, it's the paths as well. Do you know what I would say? Don't do it for me and Dave. Do it for Gloria Hunniford, who also lives down there as well. Poor old Glo can't. She can hardly walk across the road these days without falling down a flipping hole.
Well, there's one at the end of there's a big one at the end of my road, and it's right in the middle of a little T-junction, and you've got to go over onto the right-hand side of the road in order to turn left. And then if a car's coming the other way to turn into your road, then you're on the wrong side of the road. It's just ludicrous. Yes, it will be very popular. I mean, we always talk about potholes as an issue. It is an issue because while the government is doing nothing because it's too busy fighting fires and trying to save Keir Starmer's skin, and he's spending every working minute of each day sitting there thinking how he can work through the wording of what he says next about Peter Mandelson, nothing's being done. And potholes is just one of them. There's lots of other things that aren't being done, but potholes is one of them.
Potholes is absolutely one of them. It all leads back to potholes. David, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Great to have you with us as ever. That's David Wooding, of course, columnist at The Sun. You can read his column today. It's in there on page 10. Always a good read from him. Potholes, of course, on the face of it, are not the most important thing in the country. Tell you what they are. They're massively symbolic of ineptitude and failure, aren't they? It's a small thing. But if this country cannot get its potholes correct, you can't fix a hole in the road. The symbolism of that is so big that it tells a much wider story. David is in Gloucestershire. Reference polling and the maths behind it, David. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Ian.
Oh,
so
yep.
I was basically, you were saying it was a mega poll and they've done every constituency and blah, 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 but they've done 5,000 people.
Yeah.
So by my maths, so if you did every constituency in the country, that's 650, something like that, isn't it? Something, right, so there's 650 constituencies. So if you did every single one, and then if you did every age range, so say you did 25 people in each age range, well, not every age range, but say every sort of age...
more or less,
so you do 16 to 24, 24 to 30, 30 to 60, or sorry, to 40 to 60, and then 60 and above. So you do four, so say you took four sort of lines of generation, and you did 25 people, so that's 100 people, that's 65,000 people. But then you'd have to ask...
That would just be a general election, wouldn't it?
But that would be the only way to get...
Yeah, but here's what I'm told by polling brains, David, is that although it matters, it doesn't matter as much as you think. You could do 1,000 people, and the science behind it is you can extrapolate, if you use the right mechanisms, from that random group, what the wider picture would look like. That's the thing. So you wouldn't need your 65,000. Otherwise, it would take pollsters about a year to get a poll out. They can do it in an afternoon.
Yeah, but they always say this, but they always use... I've heard... what is it, that professor from Scotland, and he comes out, he's the polling expert, blah, blah, blah.
John Curtis.
And then John Curtis. And he'll say...
Is he from Scotland? It's Strathclyde University, yeah.
Strathclyde, yeah. Yes. Well, anyway, so he says, we use historical data.
Yeah.
Right. Reform didn't exist 2 years ago, 3 years, 4 years ago, didn't exist. So how can you use historical data? The Green Party, they're presently topping the polls.
Yep.
And yet nobody heard of... Well, no, you heard of the Green Party, but you know what I mean?
But I think...
heard of Reform 5 years ago. Nobody heard of them.
No, that's very true. But again, I think you factor in a part of this, a bit of that, and whatever. Look, these polling companies, some of them are, incredibly successful businesses in their own right. So you'd have to assume, David, they must be up to some... Unless they just go to the pub and go, right, what should we put in this column?
Well, I've always... I heard another pollster, and they said, how'd you do it? And they said they do it on the internet. And they asked people on the internet. And I thought, well, who does an internet poll? I reckon nobody over 60 would do an internet poll.
No, and and sometimes if you do see a sort of a fairly innocuous internet poll, you just click something to be mischievous, don't you? To muck up the poll. You go, I'll click that one. Who would you vote for? Mr. Tumble.
I just really think that some of these polls, but the other thing that really interests me, and I just thought, and I've been saying this for a long time, was during an election, polling should stop. During the last election, every poll was going, Labour are 30 points in front, 30 points in front, 30 points in front. That's what they kept saying. Well, if you said to 90... I would love you to do the poll on your radio station and say, how many people thought that was 30%? I don't care what the polling people thought or the government thought. How many of the general public thought that was 30% in front? That is the truth. So therefore, when they all go to the polls, everybody's thinking, well, they're 30% in front of everybody else, so what's the point in voting? Because they're guaranteed to be in.
Well, there is that. But then, of course, in a democracy, you've got to allow news and you've got to allow people to test the water a bit.
Yes, I know, but it wasn't every day there was a new poll. Every day there was a new poll. So why isn't... Polling should stop.
So you think the pollsters won Labour the election?
Yes, I think they did. And I think if people had actually realised the truth, because what did they get? 34%, and the other parties, there was only a few million votes in it, if the truth be... there was I'm in the Forest of Dean. There was 275 votes from the guy that won from Labour and the guy that was there from the Conservatives. 275 people.
Yeah.
That's nothing. And there was a lot of other seats very similar.
Well, which is why, yes, Starmer did win, and he won a landslide, but the share of the vote wasn't as good as Jeremy Corbyn when he gave it a go. That tells us an awful lot. Listen, David, I've got to run, but great mathematics. Love chewing the fat on this one. David in Gloucestershire, thank you to him. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up on 22:10, Alex Phillips here at 10 o'clock this morning. She'll pitch up before then with full detail about what she's talking about. Dan in Tunbridge says, through all of this Mandelson nonsense, how has David Mastermind Lammy managed to avoid scrutiny? He was Foreign Secretary at the time, after all. It appears that Lammy didn't really need to know very much. Kind of slightly kept out the loop. Do you remember when they wanted to get that ambassadorial job for another one of their mates, Mr. Doyle? I said, don't tell the Foreign Secretary. He's the man that's literally meant to make... Quite seriously, the Foreign Secretary is the one that signs off on the ambassador. And this one from Dave in South Gloucestershire says, Ian, the government, and I use that term very loosely, can't even effectively vet a candidate for UK ambassador when everything needed was in the public domain and available if you choose to look. But we took the personal opinions of a couple of his mates who said he was OK for the job. Given that, how can we have confidence that they can vet thousands of asylum seekers effectively? Not an unreasonable point. Let's get a word on the big stories of the day. Rafe Hale-Mancu is back with us, broadcast historian and fellow at the New Culture Forum. Rafe, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And nice to have you with us. It's one of those polling days again where you have something called a mega poll. I wonder if... Is that a title that they give to themselves, a mega poll, to make it sound like it's more... All the other polls were OK, but this is the mega poll, the only one you need to look at. Of course, polls, schmoles, they can be full of holes, just to keep the rhyming going. They are always open to interpretation. Sometimes they can be spot on, other times they can be wildly inaccurate. But this latest one that we've been looking at this morning is showing us that if Reform are to form a government at the next election based on this polling, they could only do that by getting back in bed or getting into bed with the Conservatives. What's your response to that, Rafe?
Well, I've been saying for many years now that you know, the only way you can get strong, small c conservative or right-wing government is by uniting the right. You know, we need to have... Britain is facing an existential crisis on many fronts, not least, of course, immigration, reversing the left's long march through all our institutions and so forth, deportation of illegal migrants as well. But if you're going to tackle those things, you need to have a raft of major strong policies in a manifesto that can be implemented. And the problem with coalitions is that you inevitably have to water down your manifesto.
Yeah.
This is what happened in the Netherlands when you had a strong right-wing government elected, but it was under PR, so it had to compromise, and suddenly the policies they campaigned on became much weaker.
Yeah.
And that's the problem with coalitions, is you don't actually get to implement the real policies that Britain needs if we are to save this country, which is why we can't have a fractured right. And the key takeaway people need to understand is that the majority of people in this country do not vote for right-wing parties. The majority of people in this country vote for centre-left and left-wing parties. The reason we've had strong conservative governments over recent decades, over past decades, is because the left-wing vote has been fractured between five parties, right? Lib Dems, Greens, Labour, SNP, Plaid, so forth. On the left, on the right, there was only the Tory party, so they got all that vote. And under first past the post, you actually could technically get a majority government with around 32% of the vote. At the last election, Labour managed to get a stonking majority of 174 with just 33.7% of the vote, which was the lowest vote share we've ever seen. But you can get a majority government. So we must unite the right. Otherwise, you know, we do have the possibility of having some Frankenstein coalition of the left there, but we need to have strong policies. And so I would say it's actually up to people to turn away from the... My view is you need to get behind somebody. It would seem like Reform is in best place to form a government. So if you want strong right-wing government, my advice is to go behind the party you think is most likely to win that. I think that would be Reform. But, you know, Reform only needs around 5, 6, ideally 10% more in the polls to have a secure chance of a majority. And there are other parties as well fracturing the right, and people might want to think about whether it's wise to fragment the right and not be able to get those policies that we need.
It's interesting that you said instinctively you think more people are left or centre-left.
Not instinctively, it's factual.
So that's borne out from the elections, you're right. I do wonder, however, having said that, if people, confirmation bias and the like is not always linked to intelligence or diligence, etc. I wonder whether people do certain things at the ballot box that they don't necessarily think. And I don't want to sort of somehow diminish a reasonable left-wing thinker's democratic right to vote however he or she pleases. But often if you go out onto the streets, and I saw this done recently where they took a load of Trump policies to the American public on the street but pretended they were Biden policies. And of course, the people answering it, the sort of Democrats and the left-wingers of the states, were endorsing, fantastic idea, absolutely right, we should do this. And then the interviewer revealed, actually, these are all Trump's policies. I think when you ask people about health, law and order, welfare and education, I think more people are centre-right, but something maybe changes, and I have no qualification to say that. My instinct is that. But when you get to the ballot box, people do something different. Would that be fair, or is that way off?
Well, saying that the majority of people in this country vote for centre-left and left-wing parties doesn't mean that they are left-wing on all issues. So, for example, classically, we know very well that for decades, the main stalwart Labour voters from the Red Wall were actually small c conservative patriots.
Good example, yes.
All right, and so you have a huge, and they're the ones, of course, who were supposed to have gone over to Boris Johnson and stayed with Boris with the great realignment. They were betrayed by the Tories, so they went over to Reform now. But there's still some of them voting for the Labour Party. There was even a Brexit element within the Green Party. It was called Green Leaves, and they were the ones campaigning for Brexit there too. And they were much more concerned about immigration too. So you do have that thing, but there are other issues people vote on, and so we do know that they vote for these left-wing parties. Yeah. And the other great issue, and this is the greatest calamity of the Tories, is that something like 2%, I think it is, or at least 1%, or whatever the point is, many more right-wing voters die each year than left-wing voters.
True.
And they're not being replenished. So we have the most radically left-wing youth in history. If the last couple of elections had been restricted to people 30 and under, there wouldn't have been a single Tory MP in Parliament. Labour and Reform and the Green Party would have dominated. And no effort was made by the Tories. They kept talking about the triple lock on pensions. Everything was done to cater to older people. Yep. And the young, they completely, it was against their own long-term interest, because now, of course, the youth are not voting for right-wing parties. In fact, I think the combined right-wing vote amongst the youth is only 24% of youth will vote for right-wing parties. That's an existential crisis, which means we only have around 10 years, I would say the next 2 elections, to change the education system, to stop the indoctrination. We've got 90% of teachers now vote for centre-left and left-wing parties. We need to rebalance that. So that needs strong right-wing governments for the next 10 years if you are to avoid having a perpetual left-wing governments into the future because of this demographic, not only of the young, of course, but also the growing migrant population, which also tend to vote for left-wing parties.
Yeah, indeed. By the way, Green Leaves is a cracking slogan for a campaign, isn't it? Fair play to them over there that came up with that. It is interesting because if you, and I've told this story so many times, things like immigration that you think would bother everybody. There are, I was talking to a woman in my neck of the woods who, I started to talk about channel migration and I gave up after about 3 seconds, to be honest, Rafe, because she kind of tackled the conversation as if we were talking about, you remember when Bob Geldof was raising money for the Ethiopian famine and, great work that he did and stuff. And that was her kind of take on the channel. She thought I was referring to a chaotic, corrupt system where people are breaking into this country, shouldn't be here, know nothing about them. She was referring to it as if this was a humanitarian crisis, and that's how she'd framed it in her head. She thought it was curious that everybody wasn't thinking that. What are we going to do with these poor people, was her answer.
Yeah. And
so even those on the left aren't, those that you think might not be on the left are on something like that. I don't know whether they're scared of the immigration debate or what it is.
Well, it's 2 things. The first thing is, of course, people watching talk get to understand what's really happening. But for example, there are only 20 million X accounts in this country, and I would say the majority of those X accounts probably aren't even politically engaged. Yep. So if you're not watching talk, if you're not watching X, you actually don't have many other areas to get the proper news about these sorts of stories. It's not being broadcast on the BBC. People are still going to mainstream media for most of their content, and so they're not actually aware. I had drinks yesterday with a friend of mine who didn't understand many of the things that we discussed here. I was raising with him, and I was shocked that this was a very intelligent person.
Yes.
You still have educated professionals I met last year who've never heard of the grooming gangs, wasn't aware of it even last year. But there's one ray of hope here. Because the migrant hotels have been closed by Labour, now suddenly you're getting migrants rehoused in houses of multiple occupation, HMOs, in areas that never saw migrants before. In the Garden of England, in all these nice parts, you're going to now find pockets of migrants appearing, and suddenly people on the left, because the areas of which are most homogenous, most white, are most pro-migrant. But once they have them living in their communities, suddenly they change their attitudes very quickly.
They realise social cohesion is a bit of a battleground. Listen, Rafe, on that point, we've got to stop. Rafe Haidel-Manku, thank you to him, broadcaster, historian, with us on the programme. Alex Phillips on the way. Dickie Arbiter, former press secretary to the Queen, former royal journalist as well, is going to join us in a few moments as well. Certainly those comments about Prince Harry from Donald Trump will feature. It's 10 to 10. This is Talk.
Than there are people on the planet.
On the planet.
Sad I missed coming on the show.
It's your WhatsApps. It's your WhatsApps. It's your WhatsApps. It's your.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Just gone, or coming up to 5 to 10. Alex Phillips with us shortly. Let's get a word, though, from Dickie Arbiter, former press secretary to the Queen, former royal journalist. Dickie, morning to you.
Morning, Ian.
We do live in strange times, so with a Venn diagram of how things cross over. So we've got conversations happening with Prince Harry, the British government, and Donald Trump. I mean, these would never happened half an hour ago almost in relative terms in the way that they do. Let's have a little listen to what Donald Trump said about Prince Harry last night. Here it is.
Prince Harry today has said that he would like to see you do more to end the war in Ukraine. Do you think it's appropriate for a royal to make those comments ahead of the visit on Monday?
Prince Harry?
Yes, sir.
How's he doing? How's his wife? Please give him my regards, okay? No, I don't know. I know one thing. Prince Harry is not speaking for the UK. That's for sure. I think I'm speaking for the UK more than Prince Harry. But I appreciate his advice very much. Great advice.
Dickie, that is a beautiful piece from Donald Trump, really, in many respects.
It is, actually. I don't often agree with Donald Trump, but he's hit the nail on the head.
He really has.
He doesn't speak for the UK, and it's not very helpful, this wayward son speaking 3 days ahead of his father, going on a very important state visit to the United States in an attempt to try and build bridges between the UK and the USA.
Yeah, indeed. And, you know, I do wonder what the meetings over there at Prince Harry HQ come up with when they're, you know, we're not royals anymore, we want a private life, but we're about to embark on a tour in Australia that will literally look every bit like a royal tour in all respects, even down to Meghan handing a bunch of flowers over to some almost part-time equerry in the background there. So we've seen all of that play out, and of course giving big opinions on stuff is kind of curious if you are still sort of trying to have one foot in the royal household and continue your life. But there's Harry making proclamations about the war in Ukraine.
Well, it's not going to help building bridges between him and his family, and his father's certainly going to be exasperated today, having sort of read or even heard what Harry's been talking about ahead of his state visit. Harry is not a working royal. It seems as though his team go all out to try and preempt any visit, any important visit being made by the working royals. And so far, they seem to have succeeded. Trump has hit the nail on the head. Harry is not a working royal. It is going to be a difficult visit at the best of times, given the state of affairs between the British government and the American government, between Starmer as head of government and Trump head of the US government. And it's not helped when this wayward son sort of shoots from the hip.
Indeed. And what you said there at the beginning, I think that's going to go down as one of my favourite Donald Trump clips of all time. It was so beautifully executed as well, very calmly. The facetiousness was not lost, but it was done with style. So fair play to the White House for that one. Sticking with Trump, though, a word on this, if you would, Dickie. Donald Trump saying that the King's visit could absolutely help repair the relationship with the UK, which has been somewhat diminished in recent, well, even weeks, really. It's happened very quickly, where Mr. Trump's view of this country is very different lately. He says there's very few people Donald Trump talks about so positively and so consistently, but I would say almost exclusively, it's the King and the Queen.
It is the King and the Queen, and unfortunately the King and the Queen aren't the government, and Trump's beef is with the British government and with Starmer. And until such time that those two can get together and mend fences, there is going to be this animosity towards the United Kingdom, not the people, not the monarchy, but to the government. And until such time that Starmer does do a bit of cooperating with the United States, our natural ally, our long-term ally, that these fences are not going to be repaired.
No, indeed. But fascinating that we have this situation where the King is going to go over there. Let's hope he's not in any way embarrassed into, you know, having to comment publicly on anything. I do wonder, though, when the curtains are drawn and the whiskey is poured, do you think King Charles would spill the beans to Donald Trump privately?
No. The King's an old hand at this. He's been doing this for a long time. This is his 15th visit to the United States. His first as head of state, and he knows where the traps are, and he's not going to fall into that trap. And Trump has a certain amount of respect for the King and knows where he can go and what he can and what he can't say. And he's not going to put Charles in that invidious position. So I think it's going to go off well. What is going to be interesting is his address to Congress on Monday. What is he going to say? He can't say anything political, but he might make reference to the fact that one of his relatives was booted out 250 years ago.
True.
And here Charles trying to mend fences.
Indeed. Dickie, great to speak with you again. Have a lovely weekend. Dickie Arbiter, former press secretary to the Queen and former royal journalist. Just briefly, Carl says, was Keir Starmer vetted? That's the curious thing. If you're an elected official, you don't have to be vetted. So Carl could stand to be an MP. The next day he could be made Home Secretary or Foreign Secretary and would not have to go through any vetting to see the highest level of security. Isn't that strange, Alex Phillips?